Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Stephanie Fernandes. In 2009, Stephanie Fernandes was living in Massachusetts with her 6-year-old daughter, Angelina. Stephanie, a single mother, was struggling financially and had no money to support them. She had learned to dance while she was in school and was quite flexible to make ends meet. Stephanie decided to earn money by dancing in nightclubs and performing for men. She kept her work a secret from Angelina, who only knew that her mother worked nights. One night at work, Stephanie noticed a handsome man staring at her after her performance. She approached him, and they talked for an hour. His name was Andrew Wagner. During their first conversation, they seemed to get along well and discovered they had a lot in common. Stephanie gave him her phone number, and they arranged to meet after her shift, where they both admitted their feelings for each other at the time. Andrew worked at a tire shop, but he aspired to be a police officer and was looking for an opportunity in that field. Stephanie and Andrew's relationship progressed quickly. She introduced Andrew to her daughter, Angelina, and they soon began living together. Angelina called Andrew her stepfather and treated him like a friend. They enjoyed spending time together, often watching television. However, over time, their love began to fade. Andrew and Stephanie started to argue, largely because Andrew was upset with Stephanie's job as a dancer in a nightclub. He wanted her to perform only for him and was unhappy that she continued to work there, even though Stephanie had quit her job for a while. Their arguments continued. One day, Angelina witnessed Andrew grabbing her mother's head and nearly slamming her into a wall, despite their troubled relationship. In 2012, 3 years after they first met, Andrew proposed to Stephanie and gave her a ring. She happily accepted his proposal and agreed to marry him. At the same time, Andrew started a new job at a correctional facility, bringing him closer to his dream of working in law enforcement. It seemed like their relationship had improved. But by early 2013, Stephanie decided to leave Andrew and rekindle her relationship with her ex-boyfriend Michael, who was 13 years her senior. Stephanie and Michael first met when she was 19 and he was 32. They began dating in the early 20s, but their relationship ended after a while. In 2013, when Stephanie was 30, she rekindled her relationship with Michael a few months later. He proposed to her at the same place they had first met and gave her a $44 ring. Stephanie accepted his proposal, but just a month later, they had a serious argument at Michael's house. During the argument, Stephanie picked up a kitchen knife and swung it at him. Michael disarmed her, and it seemed like the matter was resolved. However, the conflict escalated during another argument. This time, Stephanie picked up a knife again, and Michael defended himself by using a chair as a shield. Stephanie stabbed the chair 4 times before leaving the room. Concerned for their safety, Michael gathered all the knives in the house and hid them. After these incidents, Michael decided that he did not want to marry Stephanie anymore and broke off the engagement just a month after the proposal. In late 2013, Stephanie got back together with Andrew and moved into a new house with him. After moving to their new home in Massachusetts, tensions flared again between Andrew and Stephanie. They decided it was time to plan for a pregnancy and set a wedding date for October 2014. On the evening of May 7, 2014, Stephanie put her daughter Angelina to bed on the 2nd floor and went into the kitchen to prepare dinner. Andrew was in the living room, watching TV. That night, they each had 2 glasses of wine. During the conversation, Andrew began asking Stephanie what she had done that week while he was at work. Andrew accused Stephanie of cheating on him, and the couple began to argue. After a while, Andrew expressed a desire to be intimate, but Stephanie refused. In a fit of anger, he threw her onto the couch, grabbed her by the neck with one hand, and tried to pull down her pants. He then grabbed a nearby weapon and pointed it at Stephanie's head, threatening her. When Andrew backed away and Stephanie quickly ran into the kitchen to grab a knife, telling him to stay away from her. After this encounter, Andrew became even angrier. He grabbed her head and tried to smash it against the wall. In desperation, Stephanie attacked him with the knife. Andrew fell to the floor, and she began to cry loudly. Unable to find a phone to call 911, she ran to her neighbor, who was a nurse, for help. The neighbor opened the door. Not knowing what was happening, she saw Stephanie standing there in a t-shirt and sweatpants. Stephanie desperately called for help, saying that her fiancé was bleeding. She explained that she had injured him in self-defense because he had threatened her with a weapon. Hearing the emergency, the neighbor and his wife, who had worked as paramedics, quickly rushed to Andrew's house. When they entered, they saw the weapon Andrew had threatened his wife with lying on the sofa. They then found Andrew lying on the floor. His lips were black and blue, and there was a film covering his eyes. The neighbors found Andrew with a deep wound to his neck. They then took off his shirt to try to stop the bleeding. Meanwhile, the neighbor's daughter ran into Andrew's house, called 911, and reported the situation. During this time, Stephanie was nearby, screaming and crying nonstop. At one point, she pushed Andrew, trying to wake him up. The neighbors yelled at Stephanie to stop and told her to be quiet. They then did everything they could to save him. At this point, Stephanie's screams woke up her daughter, Angelina, who was sleeping on the second floor. She left her room and went downstairs. Angelina saw a horrifying scene, prompting Stephanie to order her to go back to her room and away from the traumatic scene. At this point, Andrew had stopped breathing. The neighbors began CPR and continued until the police and ambulance arrived. Paramedics instructed the neighbors to stay back while they assessed Andrew's condition and took him to the hospital. The police then searched the house and discovered a kitchen knife on the bathroom floor, which was determined to be the murder weapon. Angelina was taken to stay with a relative, worried about her mother. She became hysterical. Stephanie was taken to the police station, where she was questioned for 3 hours. She cried and begged for information about Andrew. Expressing her love for him and her family, she was extremely distressed, saying that she did not care about her fate as long as Andrew was alive. During the questioning, Stephanie asked about her daughter. The police also noted a large bruise on Stephanie's face and a bite mark on her hand. At the end of the interrogation, they informed Stephanie that Andrew had died in the hospital. Upon hearing this, Stephanie confessed that she had attacked Andrew with a knife in self-defense, stating that she had no other choice. After her confession, she was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The medical examiner determined that Andrew died from blood loss due to his injuries, and his injuries indicated that he had not attempted to defend himself. There was a small amount of alcohol in his blood. On June 13, 2014, nearly a month after the incident, Andrew's father went to his son's house to change the locks and discovered that someone had cleaned the house and wiped all the blood off the walls and floors. It was revealed that Stephanie's sister had hired a cleaning service, which cleaned the house on May 20. Stephanie provided the police with a photo from 2010 showing her with a black eye. Claiming that Andrew had attacked her, she recounted an incident in which Andrew became angry over the t-shirt she was wearing. He allegedly grabbed her, threw her onto the bed, tore the t-shirt off, and then held a weapon to her head. Stephanie stated that when Andrew was angry, he could be very intimidating. Cell phone records revealed that the relationship between Andrew and Stephanie was troubled and turbulent. The police had to review 18 pages of text messages on one particular day in August 2013. A photo of a deep cut on Andrew's right forearm was found on his phone that same day. He texted Stephanie asking for help because the wound was bleeding profusely, but she replied that it was none of her business and that she would not assist him in calling the police. Stephanie admitted that they had an argument and that she had accidentally injured his hand. In September 2013, Andrew sent Stephanie an angry text message accusing her of having an affair with Michael, and he insulted Michael in the process. In her reply, Stephanie admitted that she was indeed dating Michael. After this exchange, Stephanie sent private photos of herself to both Andrew and Michael within hours of each other. About a month later, in October 2013, Stephanie told Andrew that Michael wanted to adopt Angelina. In that text message, she stated that she did not care about his future. Andrew informed Stephanie that he planned to buy a house and wanted to meet her for a serious talk. Meanwhile, she also sent affectionate text messages to her ex-fiancé, Michael, who had called off their engagement. Stephanie invited Michael to go on vacation together and asked him for money for yacht. But Michael declined and suggested that she find another job. In December 2013, Stephanie went on yacht and began texting Andrew, sharing how much fun she was having. She also asked him if he had a girlfriend. After the cruise, Stephanie reconciled with Andrew and moved into his new home. Their text messages revealed that she had become pregnant shortly after they got back together. Although things seemed to be improving, Stephanie frequently expressed to Andrew that she felt abandoned by his long hours and lack of communication. In January 2014, at a doctor's appointment, Stephanie received the devastating news that her baby's heartbeat had stopped. She texted Andrew, saying that she felt like she had lost a part of herself. Andrew's parents noticed that their son was becoming more distant and that their communication was decreasing. In February 2014, just 3 months before the tragedy, Andrew's mother tried to contact him but was unable to reach him by phone. Concerned, she and her husband went to the house where Andrew lived with Stephanie. When they arrived, they saw both their cars in the driveway but received no response after ringing the doorbell several times. After about 15 minutes, Andrew finally opened the door to let his parents in. They spent some time talking and exploring the first floor of the new home. Shortly after, Stephanie came down from the second floor and told Andrew's parents to leave. They quietly left the house and drove away. Andrew's parents accused Stephanie of trying to prevent their son from communicating with the family. 8 years after the tragedy, in early 2022, the trial for the murder of Andrew Wagner began. Stephanie was placed under house arrest with a Jeep's ankle bracelet that tracked her movements. Prosecutors argued that Stephanie was guilty of premeditated murder, while Stephanie's defense attorney claimed she acted in self-defense. Prosecutors presented witnesses who testified that they saw Stephanie lose her temper and attack her fiancé multiple times. Stephanie's ex-husband, Michael, testified that she had confessed to him multiple times that Andrew Wagner had attacked her and hit her in the face. However, Michael never saw any bruises or injuries on her. A friend and co-worker at the nightclub where Stephanie worked stated that she often saw bruises on Stephanie's arms, which Stephanie covered up with makeup. Another friend, a dancer, recounted an incident where Andrew came to the club and got into a fight with Stephanie. After the fight, he sat on a bench and began drinking a cocktail that contained 2 bullets at the bottom of the glass. A co-worker informed security about this. But when they approached Andrew, the bullets were no longer in the glass. Stephanie's sister was called to testify in court. She stated that she had a close relationship with Stephanie and often discussed Stephanie's relationship with Andrew, whom she had met only 10 times. The sister observed bruises on Stephanie's legs, arms, face, and neck, and she believed that these injuries were caused by Andrew. Despite this, Stephanie continued to defend him to their family. Stephanie's sister shared another disturbing incident that occurred during a karaoke night with Stephanie and Andrew. During that night, the couple got into a fight due to Andrew's jealousy, and he attacked Stephanie in a bathroom stall. When she emerged, she was crying and her hair was disheveled. Stephanie begged her sister not to reveal what had happened. When they returned home, tensions flared again between Stephanie and Andrew. Prompting her sister to comment on the bathroom fight, this remark only added to Andrew's anger, causing him to throw Stephanie to the ground and threaten her with a weapon. Fortunately, he soon released her. After the incident, Stephanie's sister urged her to break up with Andrew. Despite these events, neither of them reported the violence to the police. Stephanie reflected on what had happened. She felt confused and uncertain about her next steps, lacking money and housing. She lived with Andrew and endured his abuse. The judge found Stephanie Fernandes guilty of manslaughter, and she was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Her daughter, Angelina Fernandes, is now studying to become a psychologist. She looks forward to working in court, supporting victims and their families, and eagerly anticipates the day she can be reunited with her mother.
In some countries, strict control is a deeply ingrained part of the culture and customs. This can conflict with the values commonly held in Western societies. Even after moving to a new country, some people find it hard to adjust to greater personal freedoms. Holding too tightly to these traditional beliefs can sometimes lead to serious problems. Aziz Yazdanpanah was born in Iran on May 29, 1955. Even as a young man, he was known for being strict and tough, yet those close to him also saw his softer side. His stern father instilled in him a deep respect for family, a sense of duty, and a strong sense of responsibility, values that Aziz strived to uphold. He was devoted to his family and longed to have one of his own. In his youth in Iran, he met the love of his life, Nasrin Rahmati, who was born on February 4, 1956. After dating for a while, they married, marking a new chapter in both their lives. Together, they decided to make a radical change and start anew in the United States of America. They successfully immigrated and settled in Grapevine, Texas, a small, pleasant town. Later, Nasrin's sister and her husband joined them in the U.S. There, the family continued to build their lives, raising 2 children. At the time of the events in question, their daughter, Nona Yazdanpanah, was 19, and their son, Ali Yazdanpanah, was 14. Upon arriving in the U.S., Nasrin became a homemaker, dedicating her time to raising their children and managing the household. This was the traditional family structure common in Iran. Aziz was the breadwinner, focusing on a career in real estate. Initially, they had enough money, but with the addition of new family members, their circumstances changed, and they had to become more frugal. Although Aziz didn't outwardly appear strict and authoritarian, this became apparent to those who knew them well. This dynamic reflected the cultural influence of their upbringing. To the outside world, they seemed like a typical family pursuing the American dream. However, Nasrin couldn't help but notice the greater freedoms afforded to women in America compared to Iran. She desired more independence, but Aziz staunchly opposed it, clinging to traditional gender roles. Beneath the facade of an ideal family, problems began to mount. Soon, Aziz faced a series of setbacks. They had purchased a large family home, and as the children grew, their expenses increased. Furthermore, Aziz's ambitions exceeded their financial means, and he struggled to achieve the level of income he desired. Nasrin offered support, but Aziz grew increasingly discontented. A significant blow came in 1996 when Aziz was convicted of tax evasion and ordered to pay a $30,000 fine. He was also placed on probation for 3 years, further straining the family's already limited resources and threatening the loss of their home. Nasrin wanted to contribute to managing the budget and suggested solutions, such as downsizing to a more affordable house. However, Aziz refused to allow her to make important decisions, seemingly acting in opposition to her suggestions. He believed he could resolve their financial problems on his own and elevate their situation. Nasrin attempted to become more involved in the family's life, including financial matters, and suggested ways she could help, pointing to the common practice of American women earning incomes on par with their husbands. However, Aziz considered even the suggestion an insult. He insisted that his wife remain a housewife, responsible only for the children and household chores. This situation persisted for several years. By 1999, their financial situation had reached another low point, leading them to consider filing for bankruptcy. However, the case was quickly dismissed. As the children grew up, their needs increased, requiring new clothes and school supplies. Aziz began to accuse Nasreen and the children of overspending. Despite their modest lifestyle, his attempts to improve their financial situation continued to fail. The situation worsened in 2007 when Aziz lost his job, depriving the family of their only source of income. Despite everything, Aziz continued to insist that Nasreen not work. However, she could no longer remain idle. She had taken courses and obtained a cosmetology license and wanted to work in a beauty salon, perhaps even starting her own business. This would significantly contribute to the family's budget. Aziz ignored her pleas, clinging to his conservative beliefs. He had never adapted to the American way of life, where women could hold equal positions with men, and refused to consider deviating from his traditional views. Finally, when her husband lost his job and could not find another, Nasreen decided to take matters into her own hands. Disobeying her husband was out of character, but she saw no other way to save her family from financial ruin. She was completely disappointed in him and realized he had no chance of fitting into the American format. Ignoring his prohibitions, Nasreen found a job, managing to work at 2 beauty salons simultaneously. This initially allowed her to somewhat stabilize the situation, but Aziz was going through a terrible emotional period and made rash decisions. He felt he had lost his manhood, not only because he lost his job, but also because he could not support his family. He became jealous of Nasreen's success and, in an attempt to assert his dominance, declared he would refuse to work at all if she continued to work like a man. He repeatedly confessed to family friends that all this had severely damaged his self-esteem. The roles in the family had now completely reversed. Nasreen began working with enthusiasm, hoping her husband's resentment would soon pass and they could build a prosperous future together. But instead of actively seeking income, Aziz ignored the needs of his loved ones. He simply stopped showing any initiative and didn't even look for work. Aziz didn't give up easily, but his pride was deeply wounded by his wife's actions. According to a friend of Nasreen, the tension in the marriage had increased significantly. The owner of the beauty salon where Nasreen worked saw her hard work and the problems the family was struggling with. Even with the strained relationship with her husband, Nasreen still hoped they could save their marriage and overcome their financial difficulties. She often spoke of her dreams in which Aziz would find a job and stop being angry with her. However, friends and neighbors noticed that the atmosphere in the house was becoming increasingly tense. Aziz's attempt to teach her a lesson had backfired. To his surprise, his wife was able to bear the financial burden, providing for him and their 2 children. It was difficult, but she managed. Instead of being happy for her, he harbored resentment and anger, which manifested in cruel ways. She maintained stability for a while. However, once the children grew up, their needs increased again, and their daughter needed money for her education, putting a strain on their finances. Aziz continued to mock her. He was so determined to teach his wife a lesson that he didn't understand the consequences of his actions. Even the children began to get angry with him. Nona and Ali were old enough to see and understand what was happening. However, his strict control did not weaken, so they did not have much freedom. Conflicts in the family home became regular. If earlier, Aziz had provoked them by blaming everyone for their failures, now the others confronted him directly. After 24 years of marriage, Nasreen stopped trying to encourage Aziz. She finally realized that he was not going to participate in solving their problems, but would continue to make them worse. By April 2011, Nasreen had decided to separate from Aziz. She and her children left their spacious family home, choosing a more modest living arrangement to avoid complete financial ruin. They moved from a 2-story house of 280 square meters to a 3-room apartment, providing minimal amenities for their son and daughter. The priority was not comfort or size, but freedom from her husband, who was a burden, and increased tension within the family. They ended up about 3 kilometers from their old residence. Nasreen took out a mortgage on the apartment and planned to continue paying for it herself. Remarkably, even in this situation, she didn't want to cause a scene and simply moved quietly, without unnecessary conflict. Even the neighbors didn't immediately realize what had happened, as it was all done so calmly. They were more struck by the sudden silence, the absence of arguments in the house. Only then did some realize Nasrin and Aziz had separated. Only the closest neighbors knew the truth. Several months passed. Nasrin continued to work and felt a significant sense of relief after leaving her husband. The atmosphere in the family became much calmer and warmer. Despite financial constraints, the burden felt much lighter than when she was living with Aziz. Nasrin spent a lot of time with her family and friends. In her opinion, reconciliation with her husband was completely out of the question. From the outside, Aziz's condition seemed to have improved, but it was just an act. One Friday in March, they were seen together again. This happened a few months after the breakup. That day, Aziz and Nasrin participated in a joint garage sale, but they didn't seem as friendly and happy as before. Many noticed the tension, but Aziz avoided conflict. He tried to appear to be a good person, even attending his children's sports competition. However, Nasrin understood perfectly well that this was just a facade. She had already filed for divorce and was waiting for it to be finalized. Everyone thought that the separation was beneficial for Nasrin. Nasrin continued to work hard, and her daughter, Nona, contributed to the family income. Without her father's oppressive presence, Nona was able to help realize their dream of simplifying their life in the US. Just like her mother, the family began to cope much better. Nona earned her high school diploma and then went to college. With the improved atmosphere at home, she could focus on more than just solving problems. She began to pursue her own ambitions. She wanted to go to the University of California to study law. If she could become a lawyer and start a private practice, it could be the beginning of a better life for her. However, not everyone was so optimistic about the future. Close friends knew that Nona was actually going through a difficult time. Behind the facade of progress and apparent resilience, there was a deep inner struggle. Back in August 2011, she confessed to her best friends that she was dealing with some serious issues that were only getting worse. However, no one could get her to reveal any details. For Aziz, the situation continued to deteriorate. He tried in every way to demonstrate that he was ready to continue the relationship, but Nasrin and the children were indifferent. During their separation, Nasrin only became more convinced that she was moving in the right direction and that life would be easier, more comfortable, alone. All this fueled Aziz's anger. He was still trying to repair the relationship, but deep down, he had long understood that it was impossible. Each meeting with Nasrin, where she shared her successes, only increased his resentment. All this anger accumulated, and it was bound to explode eventually. After a year of shocks, separations, and conflicts, on December 25, 2011, Nasrin decided to throw a festive Christmas party at her house, intended to gather all family members and mark the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Everyone who knew Nasrin and the children well was invited, except for Aziz. No one wanted him to come and ruin the mood. As he usually did, Nasrin wanted to celebrate with her children, so she invited her sister, Zohra Rahmati, 58, her husband, Mohammad Hossein Zari, 59, and their daughter, Sahra Zari, 22. Unfortunately, Aziz learned about the planned Christmas party. He was furious that he wasn't invited. Despite all the pain and insults he had inflicted on his family, he believed he had a right to attend the event, and he harbored malicious intentions. At the very beginning of the holiday, around 11 a.m., there was a knock at Nasrin's door. When she opened it, she saw a man dressed as Santa Claus. Nasrin immediately recognized him as Aziz. Obviously, no one had invited him. He could ruin the family holiday, and she desperately wanted to prevent that. Aziz behaved very friendly, trying to convince her that he only wanted to surprise the children. After a short discussion, Nasrin reluctantly agreed to let him in. As soon as Aziz entered, the atmosphere became tense. Everyone, even Sarah, felt the unease. No one wanted him there, they hoped he would leave soon after offering his greetings. Sarah was texting her friends. Around 11 she wrote that Uncle Aziz showed up at a party he wasn't invited to, dressed as Santa Claus to ruin everything. She sarcastically added that Aziz now wanted to win the Father of the Year award. The text was full of biting remarks, as she knew how much the man had damaged the lives of her aunt and aunt's children. At 11:15, Sarah sent another message. According to her, Aziz had already started to provoke another argument. Then, the girl fell silent forever. At 11:34, a call came into the 911 emergency service. The operator could barely hear a whisper on the other end of the line. The caller was begging for rescue. After a few short phrases, the call was disconnected. No information was provided, but it was clear that something terrible had happened. The operator quickly identified the location from which the call was made, and a police patrol was dispatched to the address to investigate. The officers arrived within 3 minutes, but no one answered the door. Given the alarming circumstances of the call, they decided to force entry. Inside, the officers found a horrifying scene: a festive table laden with food and drink, unopened gifts, and the bodies of 7 people. None had survived. The victims were identified as 55-year-old Nasreen, 56-year-old Aziz, their children, 19-year-old Nona, and 14-year-old Ali. Nasreen's sister, 58-year-old Zohre, her husband, 59-year-old Muhammad, and their daughter, 22-year-old Sarah. The entire family, along with their guests, had been shot. The television was on, and one of the victims was still dressed in pajamas. The children and teenagers had been shot in the head. Muhammad had sustained the most gunshot wounds, including shots to the head, chest, and stomach, suggesting he had tried to escape. Nasrin and Aziz were both shot in the head. The victims' autopsies revealed that everyone except Muhammad had been shot with the same 9mm weapon. Muhammad was found with a 9mm firearm in his hand. A second man, dressed as Santa Claus, Aziz, was also found with a firearm in hand. It remained unclear whether he was the attacker or if he had been trying to defend himself. Aziz and Muhammad were initially considered suspects. To clarify the situation, detectives began tracing the firearms. All evidence was collected and sent for ballistic analysis. The public was shocked by the murders and demanded quick answers from the police. Detectives initially believed that the attacker was among the dead and no longer posed a threat. The first major breakthrough came the day after the tragedy, on December 26, 2011. The 9mm pistol was traced back to a 1996 purchase registered to Aziz. Ballistic analysis confirmed that it was used to kill 5 of the victims. Significant gunpowder residue was found on Aziz's hands, indicating he had fired the weapon extensively. Minimal gunpowder residue was found on Muhammad's hands, suggesting he had not fired a weapon actively. Experts suggested he may have only fired once. The investigation was further aided by interviews with neighbors and a review of surveillance footage in the area. The footage showed that after the man dressed as Santa Claus entered the house, no one left. It appeared that Aziz had tried to cover his tracks. After shooting his relatives, he attempted to frame Muhammad by placing the 9mm pistol in his hand after his death. The weapon had been carefully cleaned and all fingerprints removed. There wasn't even a trace of Muhammad's fingerprints on the gun, which was impossible. Aziz fired 2 shots from a .40 caliber pistol. The first struck Muhammad, and the second he directed into his own head. Long-standing animosity between the family members, coupled with the news that Aziz was unwelcome at the gathering, may have been the final catalyst for his actions. However, the fact that he deliberately came to the house armed suggests that he had planned the crime in advance. This wasn't an act of spontaneous aggression, but seemingly a premeditated, first-degree murder of his entire family. Aziz took great pains to establish a reliable alibi, a fact that initially confused the investigation. Yet, for reasons unknown, he changed his mind and chose to end his life alongside his loved ones. he likely realized the magnitude of his crime and felt he could not live with the consequences. In total, 7 people died in this bloody tragedy. The scale of the devastation shocked not only those familiar with the Aziz family, but the entire local community. Another important piece of evidence is mobile phone data of Sarah. Detectives became interested in messages she had sent to her friends. Only 20 minutes elapsed between the start of the attack and the deaths of 7 people. The exact trigger that prompted Aziz to commit such violence remained unclear. During the investigation, various theories emerged, ranging from the obvious anger Aziz felt towards his wife and family to his potential mental state. Many experts in the field of psychiatry weighed in on the issue. Aziz appeared to be a man sinking into a deep depression, feeling that he was losing control of his life. His wife had filed for divorce a few months before the massacre, and his house was in a deplorable state. He faced foreclosure and had not secured stable, full-time employment leading up to the crime. While law enforcement officers struggled to piece together the puzzle, they uncovered the struggles of 19-year-old Nona. She had begun dating a friend and classmate, a relationship her father disapproved of. A conservative man deeply rooted in the traditions of his native country, Aziz exerted total control over the lives of all his family members, including his daughter, often to the detriment of her emotional well-being. Nona's friends reported that she often came to school in tears, complaining that her father wouldn't allow her to wear the clothes she liked and regularly confiscated and checked her mobile phone, scrutinizing every message. According to his religious and cultural views, she was not allowed to leave the house until a certain age. Even after Nona reached that age, Aziz forbade her from communicating with anyone, especially boys and men. Nona's disobedience only worsened Aziz's state of mind. When the family still lived together in their old house, he installed surveillance cameras throughout the property, both inside and out. This allowed him to monitor everyone's movements, creating a situation resembling a developing obsession. He jealously guarded her, even sealing the window in her room to prevent her from secretly running away to see her girlfriend. Aziz frantically tried to maintain control, a control he had long since lost. When the disobedience reached a breaking point, everyone abandoned him. The head of the broken family simply decided to kill everyone. Further details of Aziz's relationships were revealed. He had been quite close to his brother-in-law, Muhammad. For a long time, the men shared a warm relationship and even went on trips together. On one occasion, they cheated on their wives, renting hotel rooms and spending the night with escorts. After Nasreen filed for divorce, Aziz blamed everyone but himself, unable to accept his own imperfections. The killer became convinced that Muhammad had revealed his infidelity, poisoning Nasreen against him. From that moment on, the relationship between the men deteriorated significantly, and Aziz considered his brother-in-law a traitor. This explained why Aziz had decided to frame him by placing a weapon in the dead man's hand. Those who knew Nasreen well had heard much about her reasons for separating from Aziz. She cited his failures in upholding his cultural and religious obligations. Instead of providing for everyone, supporting his family, and creating a comfortable home, Aziz seemed to deliberately make their lives difficult, increasing the emotional distance between himself and his wife and children. He transformed their life and everyday existence into a nightmare, pushing them to the verge of complete ruin. Instead of accepting responsibility for his actions, Aziz tried to blame everyone around him. As it turned out, Nasreen's close friends had heard many times that she was afraid of her husband. She had stated this several months before filing for divorce, and after she moved out, the situation only worsened. She tried to avoid contact with him and did not allow him into the house. She prevented him from communicating with the children. Considering him dangerous, she ignored suggestions to report him to the police, hoping he would calm down on his own and not wanting to cause him further trouble. Neighbors had heard that Aziz had been carrying a gun for a long time. He completely ignored the traditions and laws of the country he had moved to. He claimed that he had acquired a firearm to protect his daughter from the unwanted attention of American men. On December 28, 2011, the entire Grapevine, Texas community gathered to honor the victims. This shooting is the deadliest crime ever committed in the city. Nasreen and the children were especially mourned. She was remembered as a devoted mother, an altruistic, generous woman who tried to escape the clutches of a tyrant, but paid for it with her life. The Christmas Day massacre of 2011 left Grapevine, Texas, forever scarred, its festive spirit tainted by an unimaginable act of violence. The loss of Nasreen Rahmati, her children, Nona and Ali, and their relatives Zohre Rahmati, Muhammad Hossein Zari, and Sahra Zari shattered a close-knit community known as the Christmas capital of Texas. Vigils at Parr Park and memorials at Colleyville Heritage High School honored their memory. The tragedy underscored the devastating consequences of unaddressed marital strife, financial ruin, and rigid cultural beliefs clashing with personal freedoms. It serves as a somber reminder to foster understanding and support for those struggling to adapt to new societal norms, lest such pain and loss repeat in silence.
Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of David Katz. The Katz family lived in Baltimore, Maryland, and were relatively well off. Richard Katz and Elizabeth were highly educated professionals. Richard worked as an engineer at NASA, designing space technology, while Elizabeth worked in pharmacology. Together, they raised two sons, Brandon and David, in the early years of their marriage. The family enjoyed a happy and loving environment, but as time went on, the boys grew and everything started to change. In 2006, Richard and Elizabeth decided to separate. David Katz struggled with severe mental health issues from a young age. Between the ages of 9 and 12, he visited numerous psychiatrists who prescribed him strong medications, including antidepressants and antipsychotics. His parents' disagreement over how to manage his condition was a major factor in their decision to separate. Brandon and David faced significant challenges during this difficult period in their lives. His classmates described David as shy, quiet, and antisocial. David kept to himself, rarely made friends, and preferred solitude. He was also deeply passionate about video games, spending most of his free time in his room playing Madden NFL, a sports simulation game. Madden NFL, named after coach and sports commentator John Madden, is a popular series of American football video games. With a new edition released annually, David graduated from Hammond High School in 2011. He enrolled at the University of Maryland to study environmental science. However, he showed little interest in his studies or pursuing a career. Instead, he became increasingly absorbed in the virtual world. Dedicating almost all his time to gaming, David's commitment to his hobby paid off, as he developed exceptional skills in playing Madden NFL over the years. In June 2017, David Katz competed in a professional gaming tournament for the first time, using the nickname Bread. He entered the Madden Championship and won the title. Initially as the 7 seed, David was seen as an underdog. However, he surprised everyone with his skills, defeating his opponents and earning recognition. In an interview, he confidently stated, "I don't consider myself the 7th seed. I consider myself the best player. And I like that I was able to prove that." Fellow players congratulated him on his victory and wished him success in future competitions. David was ecstatic about his win and felt on top of the world, also taking home a $10 cash prize. He continued to enter several other tournaments, but did not achieve similar success despite the loss. He remained undeterred. He built a career in the gaming world, earning an income and establishing a strong reputation in the community. Today, many gamers look up to him as an inspiration for pursuing a career in gaming. David's online popularity grew, but things were not as bright for him in real life. David was born in 1993, and his childhood was marked by challenges. Over the first 16 years of his life, 26 calls were made to the police from the Katz family home, mainly due to domestic disputes and conflicts, despite the medications. His condition showed little improvement 2 years later. In 2007, he was hospitalized at Shepherd Pratt Psychiatric Hospital. During his stay, doctors increased the dosage of his antidepressants. That year, David was treated at 4 different psychiatric hospitals. By this time, David's parents were divorced, and he was alternating between living at his mother's and father's homes, along with his older brother, Brandon. However, David spent most of his time with his mother. He confided in close friends that he hated living with her and wished he could live with his father. However, according to custody court documents, this was not permitted. Elizabeth twice packed David's belongings into a suitcase and forced him to leave the house. One of these incidents occurred on Mother's Day in 2007. That same year, he was enrolled in a treatment program for troubled teens. Spending several months in the wilderness, Elizabeth admitted him to the program without seeking approval from her ex-husband. 2 years later, on December 22, 2009, David wrote a letter to the judge while his parents' custody battle was still ongoing. In the letter, he expressed his feelings. "Dear Judge, today is my 16th birthday. I live with my mom, but I've wanted to live with my dad for a long time. My mom has called the police about 20 times over minor issues, like me being a little late getting home. She also drinks and yells at me, poking me with her finger and refusing to leave me alone. In the past, she used to hit me. She takes my belongings just because she feels like it and has sent me to psychiatric hospitals twice for no real reason. I can't talk to her because I see her more than anyone else, and she'll most likely just yell at me again. She lies all the time." When David became an adult, his medical visits significantly decreased, though the reason for this remains unclear. However, it is known that he continued to struggle with mental health issues. He rarely bathed, sometimes going weeks without washing, and often spent entire days playing video games, especially his favorite, Madden NFL. He would stay up until 4 a.m. and frequently paced in circles around the house. David was diagnosed with dysthymia, a chronic mood disorder characterized by low energy and a persistent, mild depressive state. Unlike major depression, dysthymia lasts much longer. People with this condition often mistake their symptoms as part of their personality, and only a qualified specialist can provide an accurate diagnosis. In addition to dysthymia, David was also diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder, a condition defined by frequent anger, irritability, and defiance toward authority figures. For David, these authority figures were his parents. Over time, David became increasingly detached from reality. He spent almost all his time online and rarely interacted with people face to face. While he was recognized as a talented Madden player, other gamers found him socially awkward and withdrawn at tournaments. He often made blunt, insulting remarks, avoided eye contact, and showed little to no emotion. David refused to engage with other players, did not seek friendships, and declined to shake hands with opponents. Regardless of whether he won or lost, David was always considered an unusual person, but no one ever felt uncomfortable around him. That all suddenly changed in the summer of 2018. Good Luck, Have Fun Game Bar, an arcade venue at the Jacksonville Landing Indoor Market, hosted a Madden NFL 19 video game tournament on August 26, 2018, with approximately 130 to 150 participants and spectators in attendance. At around 1 p.m., David was eliminated from the tournament after losing to his main competitor, Elijah Clayton. David was visibly upset after the loss and refused to shake Elijah's hand. His frustration stemmed not only from the defeat, but also from a contentious history between the two. Elijah had frequently mocked David for his social awkwardness before the tournament. David had written a guide to help players improve their Madden skills, but Elijah shared it online without permission, depriving David of the opportunity to monetize his work. They had also had a tense incident earlier at another tournament, when they both called a taxi to the airport. When the car arrived, Elijah quickly got in, closed the door in David's face, and left alone. Back to the event on August 26. After losing to his longtime rival Elijah, David left the game bar and went to a nearby pizzeria. While there, he removed his sunglasses, placed them on the edge of a table, abruptly stood up, and left at 1:30 p.m. David returned to the event. Where the tournament was still ongoing, he pulled a weapon from his backpack and dropped the backpack on the floor. None of the gamers present realized the tragedy that was about to unfold, and the entire event was being streamed live on social platforms. David aimed his weapon directly at Elijah. At that moment, the live stream camera briefly focused on Elijah, showing a red laser dot from David's weapon sight on his chest. Seconds later, as the camera switched back to the game, David attacked him. Elijah was struck by 3 bullets, one in the chest, one in the forehead, and one in the right eye. He died instantly. Still seated in his chair after killing Elijah, David began attacking others in the game bar. The attack lasted about 20 seconds before David turned the weapon on himself and ended his own life. By 1:35 p.m., the first responders, a fire brigade conducting training exercises near the game bar, arrived at the scene of the tragedy and provided aid to the victims. In total, David Katz injured 12 people. 2 of them, along with David, died, while the remaining 10 suffered non-fatal injuries. The victims who were killed were Elijah Clayton and Taylor Robertson, who was attacked in the back as he tried to flee from the game bar. Elijah Clayton, 22 years old, known in the gaming community by the nickname True Boy. From Woodland Hills, California, he was a high school graduate, played football, and had a passion for video games. Initially, Elijah had not planned to attend the Madden NFL 19 championship, but changed his mind at the last minute and decided to participate. Taylor Robertson, 27 years old, from Ballard, West Virginia, is a professional gamer known by the nickname Spot Me Pluz. Outside of gaming, he worked as an accountant and credit analyst at a major bank and had a family. During the investigation, police discovered that David had severe mental health issues. Detectives initially believed his motive was rage over losing to a rival. However, it was later revealed that David had been planning the crime 2 weeks before the tournament. He legally purchased 2 firearms equipped with high-precision sights in his home state of Maryland. David stored the firearms in his car and brought them to the tournament. He carried a weapon on his belt, which he never used, and kept another weapon in his backpack, which he used to kill 2 gamers before taking his own life. Police were puzzled by how David was able to purchase the weapons so easily, as this appeared to be a clear violation by the firearm seller. Soon, details about David Katz's troubled life came to light. It was revealed that he had been prescribed strong antidepressants and antipsychotic medications from an early age and had been treated in psychiatric hospitals multiple times. This was likely a significant factor in the case. David was far younger than recommended when he started using these drugs. Sadly, before the tragedy happened, no one could have predicted that this quiet, introverted young man could act so coldly. Perhaps the tragedy could have been prevented if the game bar had security measures like metal detectors in place. This might have stopped David from bringing weapons to the tournament so easily following the Jacksonville attack. Numerous lawsuits were filed against the organizers of the Madden NFL 19 event, the game bar owner, the pizzeria, and the seller who sold David Katz 2 weapons. All parties were held accountable.
Kapunda, South Australia, was a quiet town where residents felt secure. Inside the Rowe family home, it appeared calm. The lights were off, the house was silent, and the family was asleep. However, just after midnight, a violent struggle ensued. An intruder had entered the house, and in moments, the Rowe family's home became a scene of terror. The next morning, everything appeared normal from the outside. The house seemed unchanged, and nobody was aware of the events that had transpired just a few hours earlier. It would take several days for neighbors to become concerned and to recognize that something was seriously wrong. What happened that night? In 2010, the small town of Kapunda in South Australia was a place where everyone knew each other. Life was calm and relaxed. One notable family in the community was the Roes, who lived a simple but fulfilling life. The father, Andrew Roe, had moved from England to Australia with his family when he was 3 years old. They settled in Adelaide. As a child growing up in the suburbs, Andrew was friendly and had a passion for fishing trips with his dad. His laid-back personality made him approachable and likable to those around him. As a young man, Andrew met Rose, a lively and cheerful woman who was just a year younger than him. They connected immediately and soon became inseparable. In 1985, they married in a small ceremony with close friends and family. Their happiness grew with the birth of their son, Christopher, in 1987, and later their daughter, Chantel, in 1994. They then started a carpet cleaning business that quickly thrived, giving them financial security. By 2010, Christopher had moved out and was living with his girlfriend nearby, while 16-year-old Chantel was managing both school and a part-time job at a local cafe. That year, Chantel encountered an unexpected challenge. She found out she was pregnant. Despite the obstacles ahead, she was determined to create a future for her child, with her boyfriend, Dylan, providing steadfast support. Life in the Roe household continued normally until the night of November 8, 2010. Events that unfolded that night would deeply shock the town and lead investigators to search for answers in one of the most brutal crimes the region had ever experienced. After midnight, an intruder broke into the Roe home and committed a violent massacre. The crime scene was horrifying, with blood covering the floors, walls, and ceiling. Surprisingly, it took 2 days for anyone to notice that something was wrong. Concerned neighbors, disturbed by the unusual silence and lack of activity from the Roe home, decided to investigate. Looking through the windows, they were met with a shocking sight. Andrew and Rose were found dead in the kitchen, their bodies severely mutilated. Chantel was discovered in her bedroom, and the brutality of her murder was even more unsettling. Each family member had suffered numerous stab wounds, becoming victims of a brutal and merciless attack. The autopsy provided horrifying details. Andrew had been stabbed 29 times, Rose over 50 times, and Chantel 33 times. Disturbingly, Chantel had also been assaulted prior to her murder, making the tragedy even more incomprehensible. While vacationing in Queensland with his fiancée, Christopher first learned about a crime in his hometown through social media. Investigators first focused on Christopher, the lone survivor of the Roe family, but soon cleared him as a suspect. The investigation took a chilling turn when authorities uncovered disturbing details. After the murders, the killer did not flee in a hurry, rather, they took their time. Evidence indicated that the perpetrator changed into clean clothes and even rested on Chantel's bed. Drag marks revealed that she tried to hide but was pulled from her hiding spot. Robbery was ruled out as a motive since nothing was stolen. Valuables like electronics and cash were untouched. The brutality of the crime suggested either a personal vendetta or the actions of someone with a disturbingly cruel nature. Furthermore, parts of the crime scene seemed to have been wiped clean, suggesting an unsuccessful attempt to eliminate evidence. Bloody footprints led to the front door of the Roe home but suddenly stopped outside, indicating that the killer deliberately removed their shoes and exited in socks to avoid leaving more evidence. The most shocking discovery was the absence of forced entry. This indicated that the murderer was likely someone the family knew and trusted or had found a discreet way to enter. As investigators looked into the gruesome crime scene, they found that Rose had suffered the most. She had been stabbed over 50 times, much more than the others. She initially survived the attack and managed to make a phone call for help before the killer realized she was still alive. Unfortunately, before she could escape, the murderer came back and continued stabbing her until she was silenced for good. As investigators faced this harsh reality, they began to identify possible suspects. Andrew and Rose had no enemies, financial issues, or ongoing disputes that could explain such a violent crime. This left them considering one probable motive: Chantel. At only 16, Chantel was juggling school, a part-time job, and preparing for her baby's unexpected arrival. Her boyfriend, Dylan, had been supportive throughout her challenges. They had been together for a year, shared the same school, and made plans for their future. Although Dylan, also 16, seemed like an unlikely suspect, the police needed to be thorough in their investigation. They questioned him, verified his alibi, and searched for any reason someone might want to harm Chantel or her family. Dylan cooperated fully from the beginning. Heartbroken, he candidly expressed his love for Chantel, their hopes of raising their child together, and how the news of her murder had devastated him. He had a strong alibi, as he was celebrating his grandfather's anniversary in another city, with numerous witnesses to confirm his presence. With Dylan eliminated as a suspect, the investigation faced another frustrating standstill. However, the police had a significant asset, the killer's DNA. Forensic teams had gathered samples, including seminal fluid, which could lead directly to the murderer. Yet, when they checked it against the national database, they found no match, indicating that the perpetrator had no previous criminal history. Another important detail came to light: the murder weapon was one of the knives from the Rose kitchen. This indicated that the attack might not have been planned in advance, but rather a spontaneous act of violence. Additionally, the killer had taken the knives with him, removing a key piece of evidence. The estimated time of death was between midnight and 2 a.m. A neighbor later revealed they heard Rose scream for help around 1 a.m., followed by a loud thud, but assumed it was just a heated argument and did not call the police. With few clues and no obvious suspects, investigators reached out to the public for help, hoping to make progress. They received numerous tips, but most were misleading, consisting of wild theories, hoaxes, or leads that went nowhere. Just when it seemed like the investigation had stalled, Dylan remembered something important. The night before Chantel's murder, she had been unwell. She had a fever and had called her boss to inform them that she wouldn't be coming to work the next day. At precisely 5 a.m., Dylan texted her to check on how she was feeling. His message was read, but there was no response. Unbeknownst to him at the time, Chantel had already been dead for several hours, and it was someone else in the house who had read his message. The most frightening discovery followed. The killer had attempted to reply to Dylan's message, but since Chantel's phone had no credit, the message did not go through. This was a failed effort to make it look like she was still alive. With this unsettling clue, detectives began to investigate Chantel's social circle, looking for anyone who might hold a grudge. They soon encountered Jason Alexander Downey. Jason was part of the same school group as Dylan but hardly knew Chantel. He appeared innocent, of average height, thin, and quiet. Detectives started with the intention of asking Jason a few standard questions and moving on. However, as the interview progressed, his behavior became concerning. Instead of responding straightforwardly, he appeared nervous and avoided direct answers. Unexpectedly, he also claimed to have an alibi for the night of the murders, even though no one had inquired about it. The contradictions in his statements were quite troubling. Investigators collected fingerprints and DNA samples from Jason for comparison. He complied readily, showing an unusual calmness that momentarily led them to question their suspicions. However, they soon noticed several recent cuts on his palms. When asked about them, Jason attributed the injuries to an accident at a machine shop, but the wounds appeared too clean and precise, resembling injuries from gripping a knife. Forensic experts quickly found the answer. Jason's fingerprints matched those found on Chantel's bedroom door exactly. The belief that the murderer needed to be big and strong was incorrect. Jason, who was thin and seemed harmless, had overpowered 3 individuals in a sudden outburst of rage. Even more alarmingly, he deceived almost everyone around him. He even went to Chantel's memorial, laid down flowers, and pretended to mourn with her family and friends. Originally from Scotland, Jason had relocated to Kapunda with his mother and older brother. While his life appeared normal on the outside, there was a much darker side hidden beneath the surface. Chantel and Jason were never really close. She was polite to him, didn't dislike him, but she also didn't have any strong feelings for him. To her, he was just another member of the group. In contrast, Jason's feelings toward her were more intense. He had previously tried to show interest in Chantel, but she had rejected him. When he learned that Chantel was pregnant with Dylan's child, it triggered his jealousy. Jason's obsession had become overwhelming, and on the night of November 8th, his emotions hit a peak. When police first questioned Jason after his arrest, his unnerving calmness surprised the detectives. He denied any involvement, speaking with a disturbing confidence as if he could dismiss the growing evidence against him. He claimed that his fingerprints at the Rowe home were from a visit several weeks prior, but that was not the only untruth. Forensic analysis showed that Jason's DNA was found on Chantel's body. When confronted with this evidence, he told an implausible story, insisting that he and Chantel had been intimate during his last visit. However, the science was clear: DNA cannot stay viable on a body for weeks, it had to be recent. During the interrogation, Jason eventually broke down and shared a troubling account of the events from that night. Earlier, he had a fierce argument with his mother and stepfather, which left him feeling frustrated and angry. As a result, he decided to sleep in his car. However, after learning from Dylan that Chantel was homesick and vulnerable, his feelings for her took a disturbing turn. What began as a simple plan to drive past her house turned into something much more alarming. He parked his car at the end of the street, out of sight, and approached her home. The house was dark and quiet, except for one bathroom window that was ajar. Being thin and agile, Jason managed to slip through the small opening easily. Once inside, he waited in the bathroom for nearly half an hour, listening to ensure that the house was completely silent. He later claimed his only purpose was to confess his feelings to Chantel, but this raises questions. If that were true, why did he bring a kitchen knife with him before entering her bedroom? The investigators quickly recognized that Jason was not being honest. He hadn't come to share his feelings, he wanted to manipulate Chantel. As soon as he entered her room, she sensed something was wrong. When she pushed back against him, it triggered his anger. In a blind rage, Jason grabbed a knife and attacked her, stabbing her multiple times. The noise alerted her parents, who rushed to help, but Jason, now completely engulfed in violence, turned the knife on them as well, brutally killing both. Later, Jason attempted to argue that his actions were a crime of passion, but the evidence pointed to something much more sinister: premeditation. As the police investigated further, they uncovered more incriminating evidence. They found a pair of blood-stained shoes left in a remote location. The DNA on them matched all three victims. The shoe prints also matched the bloody footprints at the crime scene. Additionally, Jason's sweat was discovered inside the shoes, adding to the evidence against him. Although he occasionally cooperated, offering to lead detectives to where he supposedly discarded the murder weapons, those weapons were never found. The police believed he was trying to manipulate the investigation and buy time, even as more evidence piled up against him. By the fall of 2011, almost a year after the murders, Jason Alexander Downey was on trial. Throughout the trial, he remained strangely emotionless, frequently changing his statements but never expressing genuine remorse. He claimed to have no memory of killing the Rowe family, even though there was strong forensic evidence proving his guilt. A particularly disturbing detail came to light during the trial. After the murders, Jason took Chantel's pendant and chain as a twisted trophy, serving as a grim reminder of the girl who had rejected him. Jason's intense feelings of rejection drove him to commit horrific acts. When he eventually pleaded guilty, it wasn't because he felt sorry, rather, it was a strategic choice to receive a lighter sentence. One investigator remarked, his guilty plea should not be interpreted as remorse. These murders were brutal, premeditated, and shocking beyond comprehension. On April 17, 2012, Jason Alexander Downey was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 35 years. If he had not pleaded guilty, he would have had to serve at least 45 years before being eligible for parole. In a last attempt to manipulate the situation, Jason wrote a letter to Chantel's family and friends. In the letter, he expressed regret and claimed he deserved his punishment. However, the sincerity of his apology felt superficial and insincere, similar to a child being forced to say sorry instead of a man who genuinely regrets his actions. For Christopher Rowe, who lost his entire family in a single night, no sentence could ever replace what he has lost. To honor his loved ones, he decided to tattoo their names on his body, a lasting tribute to his parents and sister, who he will never see again. After the tragic event, Christopher stepped away from work to heal from painful memories. When he came back, he struggled to adjust to his previous life. Eventually, he took over his father's business. This story unfolds in Canada and caught public attention due to its unusual developments. Nicole Porciello, also known as Nicole Hasselman, was a 34-year-old whose kindness and patience shone through her work in student support services at Templeton Secondary School in Vancouver. She was more than just a helper, she was a true mentor to students navigating the challenges of adolescence. At Templeton, Nicole specialized in supporting students with learning disabilities, crafting individualized plans that boosted their confidence and academic success. Her ability to listen without judgment made her a trusted figure, often staying late to help with homework or offer advice on personal struggles. The school was not just a workplace for Nicole, it felt like a second family, fostering genuine connections and support. Her colleagues viewed her as an inspiration, always approachable and willing to help, whether it was covering a shift or organizing school events. She was cherished not only for her professional skills but also for the warmth she brought to her interactions, often bringing homemade treats to staff meetings to brighten their day. Beyond Templeton, Nicole was deeply rooted in her East Vancouver community, volunteering at local food drives and coaching her son's soccer team on weekends. Her love for gardening transformed her small backyard into a vibrant oasis, where she taught her son about nurturing life and patience. She enjoyed quiet evenings reading novels or watching classic films, often sharing her insights with friends over coffee. These small moments defined her, a woman who found joy in connection and growth, always striving to make those around her feel valued. Outside of work, Nicole was a dedicated mother to her 10-year-old son, Ethan, whose sensitive and kind nature mirrored her own. Nicole successfully balanced her career with motherhood, pouring her heart and effort into both. She aimed to be a positive role model for Ethan, showing him the importance of kindness and how to make the world a better place. Their evenings were filled with rituals, cooking simple meals together, playing board games, or reading bedtime stories. She taught Ethan to stand up for others, drawing from her own experiences helping students navigate bullying. Her friends marveled at her ability to juggle demanding workdays with unwavering attention to Ethan's needs, from attending his hockey games to helping with school projects. Nicole's home was a sanctuary of love. On November 16, 2018, a tragic event changed the lives of Nicole's family and friends forever. Burnaby police reported a crash involving a 2017 charcoal gray Kia Sorento SUV at around 10 p.m. on Barnett Highway, a busy stretch illuminated by streetlights. Emergency services quickly arrived at the scene. The car was severely damaged from hitting a lamppost, its front crumpled and windshield shattered. A man was trapped inside the vehicle, and time was critical, every second counted. Rescuers quickly cordoned off the area. They worked closely with police and medical teams, understanding that any delay could result in tragedy. A nearby driver, stopped at a traffic light, later told police he heard a deafening crash and saw the SUV swerve violently before impact, sparking immediate concern. Firefighters used hydraulic tools, known as the jaws of life, to pry open the mangled driver's side door, their movements precise under pressure. The man in the car remained seated as paramedics surrounded him, preparing to provide medical assistance as soon as rescuers freed him from the wreckage. After several intense minutes, the rescue commander signaled that it was safe to pull the victim out. The man was carefully removed from the damaged car and handed over to the medics, who noted his dazed expression and minor cuts. The emergency services worked efficiently, with each team member fulfilling a crucial role. Medics quickly began administering first aid, checking the man's condition thoroughly, pulse steady, breathing normal. Once they confirmed his condition was stable, they transferred him onto a stretcher and took him to the ambulance, where they started preparing for transport to Royal Columbian Hospital. The victim's name was Jan Popel, a 41-year-old real estate agent known in Vancouver's competitive housing market. At the hospital, Doctors immediately conducted a complete examination and diagnostic tests, including CT scans, to identify any hidden injuries. They documented a few bruises on his arms and a mild concussion, but thankfully, no serious injuries were found. Jan's condition was stable, and his life was not in danger. Nurses monitored his vitals closely, noting his calm demeanor despite the crash's severity. After receiving the necessary medical care, he was kept under observation for 24 hours to ensure his full recovery. Police officers stationed nearby began questioning him as soon as he was cleared, sensing inconsistencies in his initial account of a mechanical failure causing the crash. Jan Popel had built a successful career selling properties in Vancouver's booming real estate scene, known for his charm and persistence in closing deals. Born in Burnaby, he grew up in a middle-class family and showed early ambition, earning a business degree before entering real estate. Colleagues described him as driven but private, often deflecting personal questions with humor. His professional life thrived, but his personal struggles simmered beneath the surface, particularly in his relationship with Nicole. They met in 2011 at a community fundraiser, where Jan's easygoing confidence caught Nicole's attention. Their early days were filled with shared dreams, weekend hikes in the North Shore Mountains, late-night talks about starting a family, and plans to buy a home together. Jan's attentiveness, like surprising Nicole with flowers after a long workday, made her feel cherished. However, his insecurities emerged within a year, triggered by Nicole's growing independence and social circle at Templeton. Jan's romantic relationship with Nicole started off very well, filled with romance, deep affection, and mutual understanding. They envisioned a future together, made plans, and exchanged thoughts. However, over time, Jan began to show traits that concerned Nicole. What began as a caring desire to protect her gradually morphed into obsessive behavior. He claimed to be shielding her from negative outside influences, which led him to isolate her from friends and family. By 2013, Jan's need for control intensified, particularly after Nicole received a promotion at Templeton, boosting her confidence. He began questioning her late work hours, accusing her of prioritizing students over him. His actions escalated to checking her cell phone and social media accounts, demanding passwords to prove her loyalty. His jealousy was extreme, and he struggled to hide his aggression, often raising his voice during arguments over trivial matters like a colleague's text. At a 2015 family gathering, he shoved Nicole during a heated dispute over her talking to a male friend, leaving her shaken but hesitant to leave him. Nicole's sister, Lisa, later recalled warning her about Jan's temper, but Nicole believed his apologies and promises to change. Nicole and Jan's relationship lasted 7 years, marked by growing pain and fear. Specific incidents painted a troubling picture. In 2016, Jan threw Nicole's phone against a wall after seeing a friendly message from a coworker, shattering the screen. In 2017, he followed her to a school event, confronting her in the parking lot and accusing her of infidelity, an outburst witnessed by a colleague. Despite this, Nicole clung to Jan's sweet promises that things would improve, often citing his tearful apologies and vows to seek counseling. He vowed to find the strength to become the loving and trustworthy partner he once was, but these promises prevented Nicole from ending the relationship, even though she felt deep down that Jan's behavior might never change. Friends urged her to leave, but Nicole's compassion and hope kept her tethered, fearing Jan's reaction to a final breakup. They had broken up multiple times, but Jan always pleaded for another chance, and Nicole would relent, believing Ethan deserved a stable family. Their most recent breakup, which she believed would be permanent, happened on November 7, 2018, after Nicole confided in a friend about connecting with another man, seeking a healthier future. Jan was unwilling to accept the breakup. He didn't want to lose Nicole. Overwhelmed by jealousy, he parked his car in front of her house and shared compromising photos of her on social media, a humiliating act that left Nicole devastated. After Jan was removed from the car, the police started their investigation, led by the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team, a specialized unit for complex cases in British Columbia. They interviewed eyewitnesses, including a jogger who saw the SUV speeding erratically before the crash, and examined the accident scene in detail, collecting debris and tire marks to reconstruct the sequence of events. Their questions were designed to uncover the real causes of the crash, suspecting it was no accident. Meanwhile, firefighters finished their tasks and began to pack up their equipment before returning to the station. However, one officer, sweeping the perimeter with a flashlight, made a startling discovery. About 30 feet away from the car, in a muddy ditch obscured by bushes, lay a woman who was unconscious but still breathing. It was Nicole. Her clothes were torn, and blood soaked her jacket, alarming rescuers who immediately called for a second ambulance. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize her, noting weak vitals and severe trauma. She was rushed to Royal Columbian Hospital, where the medical team performed emergency surgery to address massive internal bleeding. At the hospital, Nicole's condition was critical from the moment she arrived. Doctors identified multiple stab wounds, some penetrating vital organs, and worked tirelessly to save her. Her family, notified by police, gathered in the waiting room, clinging to hope as updates grew bleaker. Carmine, her brother, paced anxiously, while her father, Joe, sat in stunned silence, grappling with the suddenness of the crisis. The medical team's efforts, including blood transfusions and surgical interventions, were ultimately unable to save her life, and Nicole was pronounced dead at 3:17 a.m. on November 17, 2018. Her death sent shockwaves through the hospital staff, many of whom knew her from community events, and left her family in a state of profound disbelief. A few days later, police released a statement. Nicole died from injuries sustained in an SUV crash in Burnaby last week, but authorities discovered evidence suggesting foul play. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team took charge, coordinating with forensic experts to analyze the scene. An autopsy was performed on Nicole's body at a forensic laboratory shortly after her death. An experienced medical examiner, familiar with such cases, carefully examined and documented the numerous injuries on her body. He found a total of 47 stab wounds, some deep and inflicted with significant force, penetrating her chest and abdomen, while others appeared more superficial, suggesting she had struggled to defend herself. The examination revealed that the wounds were made by two different knives, one a serrated kitchen knife, the other a smaller paring knife, indicating a prolonged and frenzied attack. Blood spatter analysis suggested the stabbing occurred inside the vehicle before the crash. The examiner understood that his findings would be crucial in helping law enforcement identify the perpetrator and bring them to justice, providing a clear link to Jan Popel's presence in the SUV. After the autopsy, forensic teams worked tirelessly, analyzing fingerprints, DNA, and the knives recovered from the vehicle. The official report compiled all expert findings, including toxicology results showing no substances in Nicole's system, ruling out intoxication as a factor. This report was not just a document, it became a crucial element in the murder investigation, providing investigators with essential information to move forward. It hit detectives cross-referenced phone records, revealing Jan's threatening texts to Nicole days before the murder, and secured surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showing the SUV's erratic path. Interviews with Nicole's friends confirmed Jan's abusive history, including a coworker who witnessed his 2017 outburst, bolstering the case. In the wake of Nicole's death, her family, friends, and colleagues were overwhelmed with deep sorrow that hit them unexpectedly and intensely. It was incredibly difficult for her family to accept that they would never again hug their beloved mother, daughter, and sister, hear her voice, or create new memories together. Joe Porciello, Nicole's father, withdrew into grief, haunted by memories of her infectious smile. Lisa, her sister, struggled to explain the loss to Ethan, who asked daily when his mother would return. Nicole's friends, who had shared her most heartfelt dreams and experiences, felt they had lost a true companion. They remembered how hard she had worked to rebuild her life, start anew, and pursue her happiness, particularly after years of enduring Jan's control. At Templeton, teachers and students created a memorial garden in Nicole's honor, planting her favorite sunflowers as a tribute to her nurturing spirit. The school's principal issued a statement praising Nicole's dedication, noting how she transformed lives with her empathy. The holidays were particularly difficult for Nicole's family. Her brother, Carmine Porciello, felt he would never fully accept that his little sister was gone. During family dinners, it's impossible not to notice her empty seat, he said, indicating where she would have sat, her absence a palpable void. Ethan, now living with his grandparents, withdrew from hockey, struggling to process his mother's absence. Community members rallied around the family, organizing vigils and fundraisers to support Ethan's future, a testament to Nicole's widespread influence. On November 29, 2018, Jan Popel was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in connection with Nicole Porciello's death. A hit confirmed the incident was isolated, involving known parties, posing no threat to public safety. Detectives worked hard to gather and secure all evidence, including Jan's blood-stained jacket and the video he recorded, which became a cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Reconstructing the timeline of events was vital to the investigation. A hit's analysis of surveillance footage, phone records, and text messages clarified Nicole's whereabouts and Jan's actions. A chilling text from Jan on November 15 read, "You'll regret leaving me," contradicting his claim of an amicable split. This organization of details revealed inconsistencies in Jan's statements, such as his assertion that the crash was accidental, and allowed investigators to assess his premeditated intent. As previously noted, Nicole and Jan's relationship spanned several years, marked by a pattern of breakups and reconciliations. 9 days before her death, Nicole told Jan their relationship was over, confiding in a friend about her hope for a new start with another man, which amplified Jan's jealousy immensely. On the evening of November 16th, Jan picked up Nicole in a rental car while Ethan was at hockey practice. They got into an argument, during which Jan pulled out 2 kitchen knives and stabbed Nicole repeatedly in the passenger seat. Instead of calling for help, Jan took off his bloody jacket, used his phone to record a video, and tried to capture the moment in a misguided attempt to document her suffering. In the video, Nicole could be heard gasping, "He loves she," but Jan showed no remorse, saying, "She brought this on herself." He claimed he stabbed her because he couldn't accept her moving on. After the attack, Jan drove home, leaving Nicole bleeding in the car while he went inside to send emails, including one resigning from his job. For 2 hours, as Nicole clung to life, Jan paid bills and shopped online for a TV and dishwasher, actions later described by prosecutors as callously indifferent. When he returned to the rental car, finding Nicole still alive, he allegedly decided to stage a crash to mask the murder. When Jan accelerated rapidly and crashed into a streetlight, Nicole, who wasn't wearing a seatbelt, was ejected from the vehicle, landing in the ditch where she was found. The deliberate high-speed impact, confirmed by skid marks, supported a hit's theory of premeditation. As a result of the gathered evidence, Jan faced charges of second-degree murder. The legal process began with a preliminary hearing in 2019, but Jan's guilty plea on December 15, 2020, expedited proceedings, avoiding a full trial. Sentencing hearings, held in March and April 2021, were a difficult time for Nicole's family and friends, who filled the Vancouver courtroom seeking closure. During the sentencing, a video recorded by Jan after stabbing Nicole was shown to the court. The judge, Justice Kathleen Kerr, cautioned that it contained graphic content and urged anyone who might feel uncomfortable to exit. The 1-minute video depicted Nicole, severely injured and struggling to breathe, while Jan accused her of disrespecting him. "You just took from me and disrespected me for months and years," he said, his voice cold and unyielding. Nicole's father, Joe, visibly upset, left the courtroom, unable to bear the footage. As the video played, Jan sat with his head down in the prisoner's dock. Carmine yelled, "Look at the video. Raise your head," prompting Justice Kerr to call a 15-minute break to ease tensions. After the video, 4 victim impact statements were shared. Joe described Nicole as a beautiful soul and the foundation of their family, saying, "He has destroyed our family. We cannot forgive him for what he has done." Carmine expressed that the crime left him feeling like a zombie, filled with anger and rage. Ethan, through a written statement read by a counselor, shared that his mother was his best friend and that he felt a part of his heart was lost. Nicole's friend, Sarah, spoke of her infectious positivity, urging the court to honor her memory with justice. Justice Kerr characterized Jan's actions as heartless, cruel, and self-centered, but noted his guilty plea as a sign of limited remorse. Joe disagreed, telling reporters Jan seemed unfazed, like he was on a lunch break. Jan Popel pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, which carries an automatic life sentence. The Crown sought 15 years before parole eligibility, citing the crime's brutality and Jan's abusive history, while his attorney argued for 10 years, emphasizing his plea. Neither option comforted Nicole's family, particularly her cousin, Gina Iuliano, who believed first-degree murder charges, with a minimum 25 years, were warranted given the premeditation. In the week before sentencing, Nicole's friends and family launched a social media campaign, Justice for Nicole, to highlight her death's impact and demand stricter domestic violence laws. Posts shared her story, photos from school events, and calls for systemic change, gaining thousands of supporters. In a statement to the court, Jan expressed regret, claiming he never meant for this to happen. On April 13, 2021, Justice Kerr sentenced him to life in prison with parole eligibility after 15 years, balancing the crime's severity with his plea. Nicole's family felt the sentence was too lenient, telling reporters outside the courthouse that Canada's justice system failed victims of domestic violence. Gina vowed to advocate for tougher laws, joining local groups to raise awareness. Nicole Porciello's vibrant life, marked by her unwavering kindness and dedication as a mother and mentor, was brutally ended on November 16, 2018, by Jan Popel's jealousy-fueled violence. While Popel's life sentence with 15 years until parole brought some justice, Nicole's family deems it insufficient, their pain deepened by her absence at family dinners. Her legacy endures through the love she instilled in her son and the students she guided at Templeton Secondary School, where her warmth remains a guiding light. The family's social media campaign and outspoken grief have sparked calls for stronger protections against domestic violence, ensuring Nicole's memory fuels a fight for justice. Though her loss leaves an unfillable void, Nicole's spirit inspires a commitment to a safer, kinder world. The Shafia family fled war and instability, hoping to build a new life in Canada. They were originally from Afghanistan, a country where traditions dictate fate, family honor outweighs personal freedom. On the surface, they appeared to be an ordinary immigrant family, a father who had achieved financial success, 2 wives, and 7 children. However, behind this image of prosperity lay a harsh reality. Control, fear, and strict discipline became inseparable parts of their lives until one day, the family found itself at the center of one of the most shocking and tragic crimes in the country's history. Mohammed Shafia was born into a poor Afghan family. His father passed away when he was just 2 years old, leaving his mother to care for the household alone. From a young age, he understood that survival required resilience. Education was a luxury beyond his reach, so he started working early. At first, he helped his mother with household chores and then moved on to repairing appliances. Eventually, he realized that there were other ways to make money by buying and reselling goods for a profit. Muhammad's business quickly expanded. He dealt in electronics, furniture, and automobiles, constantly finding new ways to grow his wealth. Lacking formal education, he relied on his instincts and sharp business sense to seize every opportunity. As his financial situation improved, he felt ready to start a family. Rona came from a respected and wealthy background where her family valued traditions and ensured their daughters received an education. Although she was raised in a loving environment, her future was largely predetermined. Like many young women in her social circle, she was expected to marry whoever her parents chose for her. When her parents announced that she would marry Mohammed Shafia, she felt she had no choice but to accept their decision as her duty. The wedding took place at one of Kabul's finest hotels, featuring hundreds of guests. To outsiders, it appeared as a prestigious union between 2 noble families, yet no one considered Rona's true feelings. After the wedding, her life changed significantly. She was now expected to obey her husband, manage the household, and meet all his expectations. Years went by without any children, which caused Rona's status within the family to become unstable. In Afghan society, a woman's value is often associated with her ability to bear children. Muhammad's frustration grew, and rumors about Rona's inability to conceive began to circulate among relatives. Over time, his irritation turned into cold indifference, creating a widening gap between them. After 7 years of marriage without children, Muhammad decided to take a second wife. The second wedding took place in 1988, and many of the wedding photos show Shafia standing next to his 2 wives. The 3 lived together in one household. Tuba Yahya was younger and more obedient than Rona. Her primary value was her ability to bear children. Once she married Muhammad, she quickly gave birth to their first son, followed by another child. As time went on, Tuba's influence in the household increased, while Rona faded into the background. Muhammad enforced strict rules that everyone had to follow without question. Disobedience was met with humiliation or physical punishment. He controlled all financial matters and made decisions for the entire family, demanding total respect. The women in his home were confined to the boundaries he set. Tuba not only accepted these rules but also actively upheld them. She fully embraced her role as the main wife, completely overshadowing Rona. Tuba managed the children, the family finances, and even dictated Rona's circumstances. Over time, her treatment of Rona grew more severe. She isolated Rona, limiting her interaction with the children and restricting her personal freedoms. Hamed Shafia, the oldest son, was raised to enforce control over his sisters. He was taught to believe it was his responsibility to ensure they followed the family's rules and to report any disobedience. Zainab, Sahar, and Geethi, the sisters, lived under constant scrutiny. Any attempt to resist their father or Hamed led to punishment. They were not allowed to make friends, freely leave the house, or choose their own clothing. Muhammad viewed them not as individuals with their own dreams but as extensions of the family, expected to uphold his concept of honor. When the family relocated to Canada, many believed this would offer the children a better life. However, the family dynamics remained unchanged. If anything, the control within the household became even stricter. Muhammad recognized that his children were now in a society where women had rights, so he tightened his authority. The daughters started to notice that life beyond their home was very different from what they had always experienced. They observed their classmates engaging freely, choosing their outfits, and making decisions about their futures. Meanwhile, life at home stayed the same. Hamed took on a stricter role. He watched over his sisters to prevent them from adopting Western habits, monitored their phones, scrutinized their behavior at school, and reported everything back to their parents. Rona had hoped that moving to a new country would improve her situation, but her reality remained the same. She didn't speak the language, had no legal status, and was unemployed. Without a passport or financial independence, she was completely under her family's control. Canada did not provide the Shafia family with freedom. Instead, it became a new place where their old rules still governed their lives. Zainab, the eldest daughter of Muhammad Shafia, was the first in her family to openly rebel against their strict control. She secretly started dating Omar Wahid, a young man of Pakistani descent who was older and would never be approved by her father. Their relationship began with passing notes, progressed to email exchanges, and eventually led to secret meetings. Zainab understood the risks involved. She was constantly watched by Hamed at home and felt unsafe even at school. However, her love for Omar drove her to take these risks. When her father went on a business trip, she saw a chance to invite Omar over, thinking they wouldn't be caught. Hamed soon noticed a pair of unfamiliar shoes in the hallway, quickly realizing someone was in the house. He immediately reported it to their parents. Although Omar managed to escape, Zainab faced severe repercussions. She was physically punished and confined to her room for several months, barred from going outside. During her isolation, Sahar attempted to carve out her independence in a different manner. Instead of openly rebelling, she subtly distanced herself from her family's traditional expectations. At school, she took off her headscarf, wore makeup, and dressed in ways her family prohibited. She also grew close to Ricardo Sanchez, a young man from Honduras who was very different from the type of husband her parents would want for her. Sahar yearned for freedom and carefully planned her escape. She and Ricardo talked about moving to another country where her family couldn't find her. Her plan was to make it look like she had gone to Honduras, while in reality, she intended to cross into the United States. However, her plans took an unexpected turn one evening. While dining at a cafe with Ricardo, she spotted her brother watching her from another table. He didn't approach or say anything, but his presence made it clear she was in serious danger. Upon returning home, she braced for the worst, realizing her father already knew everything. There were no discussions, only punishment. After facing physical aggression, she was prohibited from attending school. Sahar came to understand that escaping would be much harder than she had thought, as it might put her life at risk. In the midst of this chaos, Geethi, the youngest sister, instead of trying to run away or seeking a secret relationship, she acted out at school. Her aggressive behavior, frequent absences, and open defiance of teachers became her form of resistance. She wanted others to recognize that something was seriously wrong at home. She was called to the principal's office, and this led to a meeting with social services. She told school staff and a youth welfare worker that she wanted to be removed from her family home. However, when her parents were invited to discuss the situation, they argued that Geethi's behavior stemmed from negative Western influences. They assured the social workers that they would take care of the issue themselves. The daughter's efforts to defy the strict family rules only worsened their situation. Their father and brother felt they had lost control over them, leading to the need for punishment. The conflict between the sisters and their family had escalated beyond repair. When Zainab, Sahar, and Geethi attempted to escape their family's control, they understood the risks, but they were shocked to find that the system meant to protect them was ineffective against their father's and brother's authority. Zainab was the first to seek help. After months of being confined at home, she understood that her only chance for survival was to leave for good. She escaped and found shelter in a facility for women in crisis. For the first time, she felt safe. However, her absence was quickly noticed. Hamed, her brother, contacted the police, claiming she had been kidnapped and accusing her friend Ammar, hoping to get him arrested. When the police found Zainab, she explained the truth: she had left to escape her family. The police did not force her to return home, but they also failed to provide her with proper protection. After witnessing what happened to her sister, Sahar sought her own way out. Although she was too scared to go directly to the police, she contacted Child Protective Services. She described the harsh restrictions, constant threats, and her fear for her life. The caseworkers listened, but ultimately decided that intervention wasn't necessary since she was nearing 18. They offered her temporary shelter, but that meant she would have to return home once her stay ended. Sahar realized that going back would lead to punishment far worse than what she had already faced. Frightened, she declined their offer. At that moment, she understood that the system could not protect her. Rona was the only one who fully grasped the serious danger the sisters faced, but she felt powerless to intervene. She lived in constant fear herself. She realized that Muhammad and Tuba no longer viewed their daughters as obedient family members, but rather as threats to the family's honor. Rona understood that trying to step in would be pointless. Within the Shafia household, it was evident that the daughters had stopped adhering to the rules set for them. They had rejected the traditional lifestyle. Their actions were not only seen as rebellious but also as a significant threat to the family's reputation. Muhammad could not let rumors about his rebellious daughters circulate among their acquaintances. In Afghan culture, such stories spread rapidly, putting the family's respect at risk. What frustrated him the most was that their defiance was happening in Canada, a place where he had less control over his daughters' lives than he did in Afghanistan. The greatest concern for the family, however, was Zainab. She hadn't just disobeyed, she had run away. This was unacceptable to them. She was living independently, making her own decisions, and no longer following her father's authority. To them, this was the ultimate act of betrayal. Tuba realized that she couldn't force Zainab to return, so she found a way to have her come back willingly. She called Zainab, convincing her that their father had changed his mind. Tuba told Zainab that he had given his blessing for her to marry Ammar, allowing them to be together officially. On May 18th, they held a religious wedding ceremony at an Islamic center. The next day, Zainab had her hair done and decorated her hands with henna. Her uncle took her to a restaurant, and on the way, He tried one last time to persuade her to think twice about the marriage, but Zainab remained resolute. However, her sense of freedom was short-lived. None of Ammar's family members attended the ceremony, as they disapproved of the marriage. Tuba was devastated, overwhelmed with embarrassment, and she collapsed from humiliation. People poured water on her to help her regain consciousness. Seeing her mother in distress, Zainab ran into her arms and said, "If you're opposed to this marriage, I'll leave him." Zainab asked for a divorce, and Ammar agreed, saying, "He can't bring shame to his family." The cleric declared them divorced right then and there in the restaurant. They had only been married for 24 hours. After the annulment, Zainab's relationship with Ammar deteriorated sharply. Pressured by her family, she had to cut off all communication with him. Her life became increasingly restricted. Her family monitored her movements and controlled her interactions. Although Ammar attempted to reach out, her relatives made it impossible for them to stay in contact. Eventually, their relationship ended entirely, adding more stress and emotional pain to Zainab's life. She realized she would never experience true freedom and lost all hope for independence. Following this situation, the tension between Zainab and her family intensified, leading to tragic consequences. This marked a turning point from which there was no return. After considering the situation for some time, their father realized that his daughters would not change their behavior or abide by the family's rules. Muhammad felt that he could not wait any longer. He believed that betrayal was unforgivable and that women who damaged the family's honor needed to be held accountable. He thought he had been too forgiving in the past, and if they did not take action quickly, their family's reputation would be at risk. Therefore, he decided that his daughters would no longer be allowed to live. The only task remaining was to figure out how to execute this plan. Muhammad wanted to keep a low profile because he understood that a crime like this needed careful planning to appear accidental. Thus, the planning commenced. They began preparations weeks ahead of time. Muhammad, Tuba, and Hamd outlined the steps to carry out their plan. One important aspect was acquiring a second vehicle, a Nissan Sentra. Officially, it was bought for convenience, but in truth, it was essential for their scheme. It was reported that the Shafia family purchased a used Nissan Sentra for $5,000 Canadian dollars the day before the family left Montreal for Niagara Falls. This would create the illusion of a family trying to reconnect after previous conflicts. The vacation would suggest that everything was fine and that they were making efforts to improve their relationships. Zainab, Sahar, Geethi, and Rona felt they had no choice but to participate, even though they had reservations. Disputing their father's decision seemed futile. From the start of the trip, they sensed something was off, but none of them could foresee that this journey would be their last. For several days, everything unfolded as planned. The family visited attractions, took photographs, and chatted with strangers, all carefully arranged to ensure that no one would suspect any underlying tension among them. In the early hours of June 30, 2009, two cars, a Nissan Sentra and a Lexus RX, left the Kingston East Motel and headed toward the Kingston Mills Locks. The Nissan Sentra carried Zainab, Sahar, Geethi, and Rona. It is unclear who was driving at that moment, but it was likely Zainab, as she was the oldest and had a driver's license. Following them at a short distance was Muhammad, Tuba, Hamd, and the three youngest children, in the Lexus RX. They maintained a safe distance to avoid raising any suspicions. When the Nissan Sentra parked near the locks, Muhammad got out of his car and approached the Nissan. Zainab either got out of the driver's seat voluntarily or was forced to leave. Tuba then took over the driver's seat of the Nissan, remaining inside with the girls to prevent them from feeling suspicious. With their mother beside them, the girls did not sense any immediate danger. Muhammad and Hamd returned to the Lexus and drove to a nearby motel, where they intended to create the impression that the family was merely stopping for the night before resuming their trip. At the motel, they woke the manager to rent 2 rooms, but their answers about the number of guests seemed inconsistent, which raised suspicions. After dropping off the 3 youngest family members at the motel, Muhammad and Hamd got back into the Lexus and returned to the locks. As soon as Tuba spotted their headlights in the darkness, she quickly exited the Nissan and ran towards them. This was the sign that it was time to act. At that moment, the women in car unaware they were in a dangerous situation. The events that followed can only be partially reconstructed from the investigation. It is unclear whether the victims were harmed inside or outside the car. However, forensic evidence provided important details. 3 of the victims, Rona, Geethi, and Zainab, suffered head injuries, likely inflicted to render them unconscious before they were submerged. In contrast, Sahar seemed to have fought back. There were no signs of head trauma on her body, indicating she may have remained conscious longer than the others. One by one, the victims were either drowned in the water or placed inside the car after losing consciousness. Muhammad, Toba, and Hain started to set up the scene to make it look like a tragic accident. Their plan was to push the vehicle into the water to make it seem like it had rolled in by accident. One of them started the engine, shifted the car into neutral, and got out, hoping the Nissan would roll into the canal by itself. However, things didn't go as planned. The car got stuck on the edge of the concrete ledge. The front wheels had gone over the edge, but instead of falling into the water, the vehicle stayed in place. This was a significant problem. If anyone had shown up at that moment, they would have been caught. One of them reached through the open driver's window and turned off the ignition. They realized that the Nissan wouldn't go into the water without some help. The only way to execute their plan was to use the Lexus to push the Nissan into the canal. They jumped into the Lexus, accelerated, and slammed into the back of the Nissan. The impact was powerful. The left headlight of the Lexus shattered, scattering glass at the scene. With that final push, the Nissan Sentra fell into the water, taking the 4 women with it. Thinking they had completed their crime, they started to cover their tracks. They tried to pick up the broken pieces of the Lexus's headlight but couldn't collect them all. Then, they quickly left the site and returned to the motel to create the impression that they had spent the night there and had no knowledge of the disappearance. On the morning of June 30, 2009, a worker at the Kingston Canal noticed something odd in the water. He saw the roof of a submerged car. He quickly called the authorities. Emergency responders and divers arrived to investigate. When they removed the vehicle from the water, they found the bodies of 4 women inside. None had tried to escape, there were no broken windows, and no signs of anyone attempting to open the doors. The victims were soon identified as 3 sisters and their stepmother, Rona. Zainab was in the front passenger seat, her head leaning forward, her black cardigan soaked and worn backward after hours underwater. In the back seat was her younger sister Sahar, while Geethi's lifeless body was found above the driver's seat with one arm resting on the headrest and the window next to her fully open. Rona was curled up in the middle of the back seat. None of them were wearing seat belts. The initial inspection of the car raised immediate concerns. The seat belts were unused, which was odd. During an emergency, people usually grab onto something for safety, yet there were no signs of a struggle. Meanwhile, 3 individuals walked into the Kingston police station: Muhammad Shafia, his wife Toba, and their son Hamd. They reported that 4 women were missing, claiming that the women had taken the car keys during the night and left without permission. They suggested that the most likely reason for their disappearance was an attempted escape that went wrong. Initially, their story seemed plausible. The family mentioned that Zainab and Sahar had a history of defiance and conflicts with their parents. They reasoned that if the women tried to run away, they might have panicked, lost control of the car, and accidentally driven into the water. However, the first pieces of evidence soon raised doubts about this narrative. First, the car was found in the Kingston Canal, which is not a road or highway and impossible to access by accident without knowledge of the area. Second, the condition of the bodies was concerning. If the women had been alive when the car entered the water, they would have tried to escape, yet there were no signs of struggle, no scratches on the windows or attempts to open the doors. This prompted investigators to reevaluate the family's account, and the theory of an accidental crash began to unravel. Detectives began examining statements from the motel staff where the Shafia family had stayed. They discovered that no one saw the women enter the building and surveillance cameras did not record them leaving. This raised suspicions, indicating that someone was definitely lying. While the police proceeded with their investigation thoughtfully and without jumping to conclusions, it became evident early on that this situation was not merely a tragic accident, it appeared to be a carefully orchestrated crime disguised as one. During questioning, Muhammad, Toba, and Hamed struggled with details. At first, they claimed the women had left during the night, but when asked for the exact time, none of them could provide a clear answer. Their statements about when they supposedly left kept changing. Hamed insisted that he had been asleep and hadn't heard anything, while Toba claimed there had been noise in the house that night. Later, she added that she had woken up and seen the women leaving, only to contradict herself by saying she didn't remember. Muhammad initially stated that he had been in a different motel room at the time, but security footage showed otherwise. Police conducted a thorough examination of the car found in the water. At the scene, they discovered fragments of broken headlights. However, these fragments did not belong to the submerged vehicle. This meant that another car had been present and could have played a role in the incident. Forensic experts took a closer look at the front of the family's Lexus SUV. The damage patterns on the vehicle matched the broken fragments found at the scene. Further analysis revealed that the Lexus had dents and impact marks consistent with a collision with another car. These findings confirmed a new theory: the victims had not simply been left in the vehicle, they had been deliberately pushed into the water. Investigators knew they needed stronger evidence, so they decided to place a listening device in the Shafia family's vehicle, hoping the suspects would incriminate themselves. A few days later, the police got exactly what they were looking for. The recordings captured conversations in which Muhammad openly expressed satisfaction with what had happened. He stated that his daughters had brought shame to the family and that honor had been restored. Toba supported his words, saying they had done what was necessary. Hamed, meanwhile, repeatedly insisted that their actions had been justified. These recordings became key pieces of evidence. They proved that the crime had been premeditated and that the family had deliberately taken the lives of 4 women. The evidence left no room for doubt. The police were now ready to make their move. Muhammad Shafia, his wife Toba, and their son Hamed were arrested on July 23, 2009. That day, they had no idea that law enforcement had already gathered enough proof to charge them. The family was preparing to fly to Dubai, but they were taken into custody just before departure. Muhammad never believed it coming, until the last moment. He believed that the deaths of his daughters and Rona had been successfully staged as an accident, but the investigation had stayed one step ahead. When they were read their charges, first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder, they tried to remain composed, but their expressions told a different story. The trial began in January 2012 and lasted 3 months, drawing enormous public attention. Prosecutors presented undeniable evidence that the crime had been meticulously planned. The most damning evidence was the recorded conversations in the family's vehicle. In them, Muhammad proudly stated that his daughters had gotten what they deserved, while Toba and Hamed fully supported this sentiment. These recordings shattered any remaining doubts about their guilt. In addition to the recordings, physical evidence was presented. Investigators demonstrated that the family's Lexus had damage consistent with a collision involving the Nissan Sentra. Experts confirmed that the Lexus had been used to push the victim's car into the water. Witnesses were called to testify. Social workers, teachers, and friends of the sisters revealed that they had spoken about the harsh treatment they faced from their father and brother. Many knew they lived in fear, but no one could have imagined it would end in such a horrific way. During the trial, Muhammad showed no remorse. He insisted that the court had misinterpreted the situation and continued to claim that his daughters had brought shame to the family. Toba, who initially portrayed herself as a grieving mother, later changed her strategy and began denying any involvement. Hamed attempted to present himself as a victim of his father's influence, but the recorded conversations completely dismantled his defense. After 15 hours of discussion, the jury found each defendant guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder. Muhammad, Toba, and Hamed received life sentences in prison, with no chance of parole for 25 years. They appealed the decision, hoping for a reversal, but the court confirmed their conviction. Their actions were deemed an act of honor-based violence, a deliberate and calculated crime committed in the name of control and tradition. The family, once focused on preserving its honor, lost everything, their names became associated with cruelty. The Shafia case is now one of the most shocking examples of such crimes in Canadian history. After the arrests of Muhammad, Toba, and Hamed, the remaining Shafia children faced a challenging situation. As they were still minors, they needed guardianship. Canadian authorities intervened, placing them under state protection and assigning social services to ensure their well-being. To safeguard them from public scrutiny and potential retaliation from extended family, their identities and locations were kept confidential. Some relatives in Afghanistan tried to intervene, demanding the children be returned to their biological family, but Canadian law protected them from such demands. The younger Shafia children were given a chance to grow up away from the harmful environment of their past. They changed their names and started new lives. However, they would always carry the tragedy of their family's crimes as a lasting reminder. Their current whereabouts are unknown, but one certainty remains: they were given the opportunity for a better life, unlike their late sisters and Rona. Perry March was born in 1961 to Arthur March and Sephora. He and his wife, Janet, were complete opposites of each other. He is ordinary, but his wife was a very bright, beautiful woman, dreamy and talented. Janet grew up in a wealthy family, as the daughter of a well-known lawyer from Nashville. Janet and Perry met as students at the University of Michigan in the early 1980s and quickly became inseparable. When Perry graduated and moved to Chicago to work as a financial broker, Janet followed him without hesitation. However, she soon began to miss her home and family. To support Perry's education, her father agreed to pay for his expensive tuition at the prestigious Vanderbilt Law School. As a result, Janet and Perry returned to Nashville, and since Perry was hesitant, it was Janet who proposed to him in Percy Warner Park. They got married in 1987 and moved into a house in a well-known area of the city, which was rented and paid for by Janet's father. The following year, Perry graduated and chose to work for a local law firm in Nashville instead of accepting offers from large firms in New York. In 1990, Janet gave birth to a son named Samson, affectionately called Sammy. On the surface, this family seemed to have everything: a mother, a father, and a son. Unfortunately, this outward appearance of happiness was deceptive. In 1991, a scandal emerged at the law firm where Perry worked after a young female specialist received an inappropriate proposal from a colleague. A stranger sent her a letter expressing his attraction to her and his desire for an intimate relationship. Feeling embarrassed, the young woman reported the incident to her boss. After this, 2 more letters arrived, urging her to respond to the proposal by leaving a message in the firm's library. In response, the firm took measures to identify the sender of these inappropriate letters. They installed a CCTV camera in the library where she was supposed to leave her reply. When the man came to collect the letter, the firm's lawyers were shocked to discover that he was Perry March, the husband of Janet. Faced with evidence from the video, Perry refused to confess. The law firm gave him an ultimatum: resign or be fired. He chose to resign. This uncomfortable situation led to legal consequences, as the female employee who received the unwanted proposal sued Perry for financial compensation. He was ordered to pay her. To avoid a harassment claim, she requested $25,000, half of which Perry was to pay in monthly installments, while the remaining $12,500 was to be paid in a lump sum. This arrangement was made to keep his wife, Janet, from discovering the scandal. In 1994, Janet and Perry welcomed their second child, a lovely daughter named Sephora. As their family grew, they decided to build a larger home and purchased nearly 2 acres in the affluent suburb of Forest Hill. Over the next year, they worked on constructing their dream house, a $650,000 mansion designed in the French country style. Janet was very enthusiastic about the project and closely oversaw every stage of the construction. However, her demands were sometimes unreasonable, leading Perry to step in and help mediate between her and the construction team. Although the new house brought excitement, Janet and Perry's marriage was facing difficulties. Their relationship had been strained for several months, and they frequently attended therapy, both together and individually. At home, they rarely communicated. Perry was often away for at least 3 days a week, and their arguments escalated whenever he returned. A family therapist suggested they take a break from each other, but Janet was adamant about getting a divorce. In August 1996, a significant incident occurred that changed the course of Janet and Perry's relationship forever. Perry needed to pay the final installment to a woman at a law firm, but, due to financial issues, he sent her a letter requesting to postpone the payment until October. Unfortunately, Janet read the letter, which led to a heated argument between them. In the aftermath, Janet contacted her mother to arrange a meeting with a divorce lawyer. On August 15, 1996, Janet was scheduled to meet with the lawyer but never arrived at the office because she mysteriously disappeared that night. Perry claimed that Janet left voluntarily after their argument. He told the police that she expressed a desire to get some space to think but did not specify where she was going. He said that at around 8:30 p.m., Janet packed a suitcase, took her passport and $1,500 in cash, and left in her car. He also mentioned that she left him a list of tasks to complete before her return. After she left, he informed friends and family of her departure as he normally would. The next morning, Deneen Beard, the maid, came to clean the house and was surprised to find everything in order. However, Perry asked her to focus on her work and not to go into the children's room. Then a nanny named Ella Goldschmidt, who had previously arranged with Janet that her son would play with Sammy, arrived. After Deneen left, Ella noticed Sammy jumping on an oriental rug that was rolled up on the floor next to the playroom. When she returned around 2 p.m. to pick up her son, the rug was no longer there. Initially, Janet's family believed Perry's explanation. Janet's father went to Nashville International Airport to check if Janet had left her car there. Janet's mother, Carolyn, became increasingly worried, as her daughter would not just vanish without a word and would never abandon her children. Although Carolyn wanted to contact the police, Perry convinced her to wait 12 days, claiming that Janet had said she would return by then. That evening, Perry called his father, Arthur, a retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel living in Jalisco, Mexico. Arthur readily agreed to travel to Nashville to support his son during this challenging time. In the meantime, Janet's family's concerns continued to escalate. With August 25th being Sammy's 6th birthday, fears grew that something had happened to Janet. She would definitely not miss such an important occasion. While Perry and Janet's parents told the party guests she had traveled to California to visit her brother and was postponing her return due to an ear infection, her sudden disappearance raised alarm among her loved ones. Days passed without any news from Janet, and the anxious waiting could not go on much longer. On August 29th, Janet's parents reported her missing to the police. Detective David Miller, a skilled investigator with extensive experience, was assigned to the case. He initiated the investigation by reaching out to hospitals and reviewing Janet's bank and credit card accounts, which had not been used since her disappearance, raising concerns about her well-being. On September 7th, authorities located Janet's car in a parking lot at an apartment complex about 5 miles from her home. The car appeared to have been parked there for several weeks. Inside, police discovered Janet's bag, which contained her documents, passport, credit cards, and $11 in cash. They also found a suitcase filled with clothes, notably absent of a bra, toothpaste, a comb, or underwear, which seemed unusual. Additional evidence included a pair of white sandals in the glove compartment and unusual, dirty bicycle tire tracks near the car. Investigators needed to analyze this evidence carefully. On September 10, 1996, Perry was questioned by investigators and consented to a search of his home. The police conducted the search over the weekend of September 14th to 15th while Perry was away in Chicago with his children. The house showed no signs of domestic violence or anything noteworthy. A few days later, the owner of a tire store contacted law enforcement to inform them that Perry had visited the store on August 21st, a week after Janet went missing. Perry inquired about purchasing a new set of tires, despite the good condition of those already on his car. When asked why he wanted a different brand, his response raised further suspicions. On September 18th, Perry decided to move to Chicago with his children. Before leaving, he had a concerning conversation with Janet's longtime friend, Diane Sachs, which she later reported to the police. Perry asked Diane if she thought he could kill his wife. Although she hesitated to answer, he proceeded to ask the disturbing question of what she would think if he had loaded Janet's body into his car and taken it to a remote location for disposal. This raised serious suspicions about him. As a result, the police launched a comprehensive search for Janet, involving divers, 2 helicopters with thermal scanners, specially trained dogs, police officers, and volunteers. Meanwhile, Perry hired a lawyer, who informed the police that Perry would not cooperate with the investigation. In November, as Janet's parents held a day of mourning for her, Perry chose not to attend, further increasing the police's suspicions about him. Over time, a theory about Janet's disappearance began to develop. It was suggested that Perry and Janet had a heated argument the night she disappeared. During this argument, Janet may have said something that provoked Perry, leading him to strike her hard. Given that Perry held a black belt in martial arts, a single blow could have killed her, or he might have strangled her. Whether intentional or not, when he found Janet dead at his feet, he was faced with a dire decision. Investigators believe that Perry hid Janet's body either in the basement, in the woods, or near their home. Furthermore, Ella had mentioned that there was a rolled-up rug that she had noticed in Perry's house that morning. Janet's body may have been inside that carpet, and tragically, little Sammy may have unknowingly played around his mother's body. Afterward, Perry moved her body to his Jeep and drove to a location where he buried it. He then drove Janet's car to where it was later discovered, taking her mountain bike with him so he could ride it back home. However, these are merely speculations, and the police were tasked with uncovering evidence of the murder, marking a new phase in the investigation. Janet's father, a prominent lawyer, was determined to uncover the truth about his daughter's disappearance. Meanwhile, Perry applied to become the manager of Janet's estate, but her parents opposed this and filed their own petition. Perry refused to consent. Ultimately, the court designated a guardian to oversee Janet's property and ordered Perry to return some items he had taken. He only returned them after being urged to do so. This was just the beginning of a legal dispute between Perry and Janet's parents. The battle continued until late 1999 when the court granted Janet's parents the right to visit their grandchildren. They traveled to Perry's new home in Illinois, eager to see the children, but were shocked to discover that he had moved to Mexico to be with his father. Moreover, just weeks after relocating, Perry married a local woman named Carmen Rojas. 3 years had passed since Janet went missing, and she still had not been officially declared dead. This prompted her parents to file a lawsuit against Perry for the manslaughter of their daughter. When Perry did not appear in court to contest the charges against him, the judge ordered him to pay $113.5 million in compensation to Janet's parents in May 2000. Janet's parents traveled back to Mexico to confront Perry and requested to meet his children. He firmly refused their request, prompting them to return to Nashville. A month later, they returned to Mexico with a court order and assistance from local police, who arrested Perry for violating his visa. Although the charges were eventually dropped, by the time Perry got back home, his children were missing. Taking advantage of Perry's absence, Janet's parents took the children to the U.S. and sought permanent custody once they were home. This led to a direct confrontation and sparked another legal battle for custody. Ultimately, Perry regained custody, and Janet's parents were reprimanded for unlawfully taking the children. Later, the Tennessee Court of Appeals overturned Perry's manslaughter conviction. At this point, Perry believed he could lead a stable life in Mexico with his new wife and children, feeling confident that nothing would disrupt his plans. However, unexpected developments were on the horizon, as the local police department, along with 2 investigators, continued to actively investigate Janet's case. In the latter half of 2004, the prosecutor's office introduced new evidence that led to a retrial, during which 59 witnesses were heard. This resulted in charges against Perry for second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. In October 2005, an arrest warrant and a request for extradition to the United States were issued for Perry. While being transported, Perry was accompanied by Pat Postiglione, one of the detectives involved in the investigation. During the journey, Perry was quite talkative and asked the detective whether he could face murder charges if an accident occurred. He also told Pat that he would be willing to confess everything if he could receive a sentence of no more than 7 years. The detective stated that he would pass this information on to the district attorney. Janet's parents were determined not to allow Perry to enjoy a new life after spending a short time in prison. They submitted a new petition for custody of the children, which the judge approved. Facing difficulties in the legal system, Perry sought another solution. He attempted to persuade his cellmate, Russell Ferris, to kill Janet's parents. Russell became interested in the plan and learned that Perry's father, Arthur, would act as the intermediary. After 2 months of discussions among the three, Russell's lawyer notified the police about Perry's offer to kill Janet's parents. From that point on, Perry's situation became increasingly complicated. Initially, the evidence against Perry for murder was weak and mostly circumstantial. His lawyer argued that there was no solid proof that Perry had committed the crime. If he had been found not guilty, he could not be tried again for the same offense. However, the situation changed dramatically with the discovery of a murder-for-hire plot involving Janet's parents. Now, the police had recorded conversations revealing details of the planned murder, including statements made by both Perry and his father, Arthur. When Arthur listened to the recordings, he realized his errors and agreed to testify against his son in exchange for a more lenient sentence. The disturbing truth emerged. Arthur, Perry's father, revealed that his son had confessed to him about killing Janet. A few weeks after the murder, Perry sought his father's help because he was anxious about the body being discovered. He asked Arthur to help hide it. One night, they drove to a location where, according to Arthur, the body was already decomposing and stored in a bag. Arthur recounted loading the remains into Perry's Jeep. They then traveled north to Bowling Green, Kentucky, where they stayed at a motel. Under the cover of darkness, Arthur attempted to dispose of the body. He looked for a body of water deep enough to conceal the remains but was unable to find one before sunrise. Eventually, he located a suitable spot. Arthur later attempted to guide investigators to the location where he had hidden the body, but he couldn't specify the exact spot. However, both the police and the jury believed his account of the incident. According to Arthur, after Perry killed Janet, her body remained in their home for some time, wrapped in a rug. Unfortunately for Arthur, his confession did not yield the leniency he had hoped for, and he died just months later while incarcerated. Perry faced a much harsher fate. He was convicted of second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, abuse of a corpse, theft, and conspiracy to commit murder, resulting in a 56-year prison sentence. He is currently incarcerated at the Morgan County Correctional Complex, where he assists fellow inmates with their legal appeals in the prison law library. He will be eligible for parole in 2038. Tragically, Janet's remains have never been found.
What keeps a marriage together when love, trust, and respect are absent? Some people attempt to maintain the family for the sake of their children, while others worry about what others might think. Additionally, some may feel restrained by their religious beliefs, or a combination of these factors. However, the intense desire to save a marriage at any cost can sometimes lead to devastating outcomes. The story of Jacqueline and Paul Crimble is not one of a kind, but it gained a lot of attention because of its brutal nature, greed, and lack of morals. The perpetrator was called the Black Widow and was imprisoned. However, in a revealing interview, her daughter admitted that Jacqueline showed her cruelty even while in prison. Jacqueline, known as Jackie, was born in 1974 in County Armagh, Northern Ireland. She was the youngest of 2 children in a typical middle-class family. Since childhood, Jacqueline displayed erratic, spoiled, defiant, and occasionally aggressive behavior. As a teenager, her actions became increasingly unmanageable, but her family attributed this to typical adolescent issues, believing she would eventually outgrow it. In high school, Jacqueline met Paul Crimble, who was 3 years older than her and very different in personality. Despite their differences, they were drawn to each other, a classic example of opposites attracting. Paul was humble and shy. Coming from a religious background, he was a good student, recognized for his talents. Jacqueline's boldness, confidence captivated him, She was the first girl he had serious feelings for, and likely the only one. Jacqueline's parents were supportive of her relationship with Paul, believing he would help her become more calm and sensible. It often felt like they treated Paul better than Jacqueline, welcoming him into the family from the very first meeting. In contrast, Paul's parents were cautious about his choice, but they allowed the relationship to continue. Friends from school noticed that Jacqueline and Paul seemed mismatched. Jacqueline frequently instigated conflicts and preferred to settle matters with physical confrontations, while Paul always sought peaceful solutions. He was known for being friendly, open-minded, and responsible, consistently keeping his promises and ready to lend a helping hand. Paul was described as a kind, sensible, and mature young man, displaying wisdom beyond his years. At 17, Jacqueline became pregnant by her boyfriend, Paul, who was 20 and already in college. She told him right away. Upon hearing the news, Paul immediately stated that he was ready to marry her, take full responsibility for her and the baby. Jacqueline felt unprepared for family life and raising a child. However, terminating the pregnancy was not an option for her, as neither she nor Paul, belonging to a religious family, could consider it. Paul decided to buy an engagement ring and propose to Jacqueline, who accepted. They had a simple wedding in 1992, celebrating with their closest family and friends. A few days before the event, Paul shared with his best friend that he and Jacqueline were fundamentally different in many ways. He had doubts about how genuine her feelings were and even felt afraid of her temper. Paul also questioned whether his feelings for her were true love or simply sympathy and obligation. Since he had never been in a relationship with anyone else, he had no basis for comparison. His friend listened carefully and cautioned Paul against going through with the marriage, suggesting it could be the biggest mistake of his life and might lead to lifelong unhappiness. Despite this advice, Paul was resolute. He felt he couldn't abandon Jacqueline, who was expecting their child. He believed that becoming a mother would positively change Jacqueline, making her more gentle and calm. Paul hoped for a positive future, but he was unaware of how mistaken he was. Family life without love began to reveal itself. In early 1993, they had their first child, a daughter named Danielle. 6 years later, Jacqueline gave birth to their son. Paul worked hard to support his family and ensured they had everything they needed. After their second child was born, the Crimbles decided to move to a larger home and bought a cozy 3-bedroom townhouse in Armagh, relocating in 2000. By that time, Paul had a senior position in mechanical engineering and was earning a good salary. Meanwhile, his wife chose not to work, saying she preferred to take care of the household and the children. Unfortunately, she wasn't very good at these tasks. Jacqueline was often selfish, lazy, quick-tempered, and displayed aggression, even toward their children. As the children got older, Jacqueline attempted to find a job, but her argumentative and confrontational nature led to her being frequently unemployed. Instead of working, she spent most evenings at bars, drinking alcohol, while her husband stayed home to care for their daughter and son. When sober, Jacqueline was not very pleasant, but when she drank, she became aggressive, instigating conflicts, getting into fights, using offensive language, and behaving inappropriately with various men. Any attempts to ask her to behave more appropriately were met with hostility, making her unpredictable. Neighbors and family friends were aware of the situation, felt sympathy for Paul and the children, who were most affected by Jacqueline's behavior. Living in a small, quiet town, many people knew about her troubles and tried to steer clear of her. Her negative reputation impacted her husband and children, causing them to face issues with their peers at school. Jacqueline instilled fear in her family, as she could become aggressive at any time. Paul tried to tolerate the situation, but it was evident to his friends, family, and co-workers that he was uncomfortable around Jacqueline, or even when she was mentioned. Many advised him to leave her, but Paul was worried about losing custody of their children. During disagreements, Jacqueline would quickly threaten to prevent him from seeing their daughter and son. She also warned him that she could enlist her male acquaintances from bars to harm him. Consequently, Paul often surrendered to her demands and remained quiet. On the morning of June 20th, 2004, Jacqueline called emergency services, urgently asking for help. She reported that 3 strangers had invaded her home, attacking both her and her husband. They had tied them up and attempted to rob them before escaping in their car, taking her husband with them. When police officers and medics arrived at their home, they found Jacqueline with her hands bound behind her back using a plastic cable tie, but her legs were free, suggesting she had managed to partially escape. Interestingly, she showed no visible injuries or bruises, despite claiming that the attackers had beaten them. Thankfully, their children were not at home, as they had gone to spend the weekend with their paternal grandparents. Jacqueline recounted that the night before, she and her husband had gone to a bar to unwind. After having a few drinks, they returned home after midnight. As Paul was about to open the front door, 3 masked individuals suddenly emerged from the shadows and forced their way inside. The intruders, armed with a gun, restrained the couple, physically attacked them, demanded money, and banned substance. Paul attempted to compromise with them, pleading for their release and promising not to contact the police. But this only made the attackers more aggressive. They struck him multiple times and began to suffocate him with a plastic bag, while Jacqueline looked on in horror. When the intruders realized there was no cash or illegal substances in the house, they decided to take the car, but inexplicably took Paul with them, leaving Jacqueline tied up and alone. After the criminals took Paul away, Jacqueline was able to reach the phone and call the police, using her toe to dial. She believed her husband might still be alive and urgently pleaded with the detectives to rescue him. Despite her frantic situation, Jacqueline seemed unusually calm, but the authorities found no reason to doubt her at the time. The investigators to start gathering evidence at the crime scene. They sought any information about the attackers, but Jacqueline stated that the criminals wore masks and she couldn't remember any distinguishing features like their clothing, speech, or physical traits. All she could confirm was that there were 3 male assailants. By Monday morning, less than a day after the attack, the search had begun. The Crimble family's car was found abandoned 3 miles from their home, parked in a deserted alley next to an empty house. Inside the trunk, authorities discovered the mutilated body of Paul. He showed clear signs of beating and torture. His hands were tied behind his back, his legs were bound with a cable tie, and his body was marked with numerous bruises. These criminals left no evidence behind, which was odd. When Jacqueline was informed about this horrifying discovery, she remained calm. It seemed that the violent loss of her husband, the father of her children, did not affect her much. Although she attempted to show surprise and grief, she did not shed a single tear and instead asked when she would be able to get her car back. Her unusual reaction raised suspicions, leading the police to scrutinize her. At first, Jacqueline's story was accepted without question and regarded as the only trustworthy version of events. However, her odd behavior as a widowed mother of 2 raised doubts among law enforcement, leading them to suspect she might be dishonest. Investigations revealed that her marriage to Paul had been deteriorating for a long time, and she was not an exemplary wife or mother. Neighbors, acquaintances, even her own children and parents had negative things to say about her. Additionally, it emerged that Jacqueline had been involved with a man named Roger Ferguson for several months. Roger, who lived with his mother on a farm in Armagh, was frequently seen with Jacqueline at various entertainment spots in town, where they were drinking. He would also visit her at home while her husband was at work and the children were at school and daycare. A day after the disfigured body was discovered in a car, Jacqueline went from being seen as a victim to the primary suspect, with Roger now viewed as a potential accomplice. While there were no reports of suspicious individuals seen in town, nearly everyone who had interacted with the victim shared negative opinions about her. It was soon discovered that the deceased man had an insurance policy worth £300,000 British pound, which would go to his wife upon his death. This created a potential motive for the investigation. Before, Jacqueline stated that she was able to call for help by using her toe on a button phone. However, During the first inspection of the crime scene, investigators observed that the phone was on the coffee table face down, while her hands were tied behind her back. This made it impossible for her to have flipped the phone over after making the call or to have dialed for help if it had been in that position from the beginning. Their computer search history showed unusual inquiries. Someone had been searching for information about life insurance payouts and procedures related to the death of a policyholder for several months. When Jacqueline was questioned about this, she insisted she had no knowledge of it and suggested that Paul might be interested. Roger, suspected of being an accomplice in the crime, had a strong alibi. His mother stated that he had stayed home all night because he was feeling unwell. She mentioned that, around 1:30 a.m., she was looking in the medicine cabinet for something to treat his stomach problems. Despite her convincing account, police did not remove her son from the list of suspects. The police tracked the suspects' locations on the night of the crime using their cell phone signals and found that Roger was not at home, as his mother had claimed. Instead, he was at the Crimbles' house for several hours. Roger continued his relationship with Jacqueline, and they were seen together at a bar the day after Paul's funeral. Interestingly, Jacqueline and Roger also visited a car dealership together to look at SUVs and discuss financing options for such a costly purchase. Roger's mother was with them during this visit, which raised further suspicions. The police believed that they had already made plans for how to use the insurance money following Paul's death, and they suspected that Roger's mother was likely aware of this. During interrogations, Jacqueline maintained that she never cheated on her husband and had no intention of harming him, but no one believed her anymore. Before the tragedy, she had started a job as a caregiver at a nursing home, but was fired within weeks due to ongoing conflicts and dishonesty. Despite this, she didn't inform her husband and pretended to go to work or have night shifts while staying at her lover Roger's house. Her deception was uncovered by chance when Paul met one of Jacqueline's former colleagues, who revealed the truth to him. When Paul confronted Jacqueline, it led to another heated argument. She threatened to leave him for her lover, take the children, and prevent him from interacting with them, which became Paul's biggest fear. To avoid losing his family, he chose to overlook her infidelity and could only confide in his closest friend, who later served as a witness in court, recounting Paul's situation. A cunning plan was in the works. Roger was not very bright. He was somewhat gullible and easily influenced. Jacqueline quickly took control over him, using her charm to make him do whatever she wanted. He would readily fight for her, which made her feel important. He was likely in love with her and believed everything she said. Meanwhile, Jacqueline complained to Roger about her husband, claiming he was rude, cruel, even abusive. Although these accusations were untrue, with each complaint, Roger grew to hate Paul more, thinking he was hurting Jacqueline and was the main reason for their unhappiness. Jacqueline planted the idea in Roger's mind that if her husband were gone, all their problems would disappear, allowing them to be together while also gaining a significant amount of money for a comfortable life. About 2 weeks before the tragedy, Jacqueline looked for people to help her commit the crime for money. However, after thinking it over, she and Roger decided against that plan. They believed they could do it themselves without leaving evidence or witnesses, ensuring they would receive the full insurance payout. On Friday, June 18th, Jacqueline took the children to spend the weekend with their grandparents. On Saturday, she encouraged her husband, Paul, to go out for drinks, to unwind and have a conversation. Paul happily agreed, believing it could improve their relationship, but he didn't realize it was a setup for something far worse. That night, patrons at the bar observed Jacqueline making significant efforts to intoxicate her husband, who doesn't drink. She bought multiple drinks and nearly forced him to take one shot after another. After midnight, she helped her unsteady husband leave the bar, and they were captured on surveillance cameras. This was the last time Paul was seen alive. The investigation uncovered a major timing issue. The bar was a 10-minute walk from the Crimble home, and the attack happened right after they returned, lasting no more than 15 minutes. Jacqueline stated that her husband was kidnapped afterward and taken away in their car, prompting her to call the police immediately. However, there was a gap of about an hour and a half between when they were captured on camera and when she contacted the police. Investigators suspected that this time was used by the perpetrators to cover up their actions and make the attack appear to have been committed by other individuals. Additionally, it seemed that Jacqueline deliberately got her husband drunk so he would be unable to fight back. She claimed that the attackers kicked Paul while he was incapacitated and then began to strangle him by placing a plastic bag over his head and securing it with tape. The injuries found on the deceased confirmed her story, but by that point, the police were almost certain that the attackers were Jacqueline and her lover, Roger Ferguson. After a thorough investigation of the crime scene, clear evidence was uncovered. Detectives found a partially erased footprint of a man's shoe that had been poorly cleaned. The tread pattern matched Roger's shoes, but this alone is considered circumstantial evidence. More concrete evidence against the criminal couple emerged as well. In the kitchen trash, detectives discovered a cigarette butt with Roger's saliva on it, and a partial fingerprint from him was located on the cable tie that bound Jacqueline's hands. Additionally, Roger's fingerprints were found on the ties that bound the victim's hands and feet. The bag used to suffocate the victim contained sweat and oil traces from both of the suspects. The investigation revealed another person involved in this violent crime, Colin Robinson, 17, a minor acquaintance of Roger. On the night of the attack, Roger called Colin to ask for an unspecified favor. Following Roger's instructions, Colin parked his car at the end of the street and walked to the house to avoid drawing attention. However, when Colin realized the situation, he wanted to escape, but Roger threatened him with a knife and coerced him into helping move the body into the car's trunk. Afterward, they drove the car to a secluded area and abandoned it. Initially, Colin denied any involvement in the crime, but during a second interrogation, he broke down and started to confess. The trial and sentencing took place after a thorough investigation that lasted several months. During this period, investigators collected solid evidence, interviewed witnesses, and obtained a confession from the third person involved in the crime. However, the trial only started in spring 2007, nearly 3 years after Paul Crimble was killed. On May 7, 2007, Jacqueline Crimble and Roger Ferguson were convicted of premeditated murder with the intent of collecting insurance money. Jacqueline received a 20-year prison sentence, while Roger, her lover and accomplice, was sentenced to 18 years. Colin Robinson, the young accomplice, received a 3-year sentence for aiding the criminals and trying to conceal the criminal. Additionally, Roger's elderly mother was also held accountable for perjury and giving a false alibi for her son. Given her old age and serious health issues, she was sentenced to only 1 year of probation. Jacqueline sought revenge on her own children. Even while in prison, she felt bitterness towards her family for not supporting her during her trial and for their relief at her imprisonment. Her own mother even stated that people like Jacqueline should be kept away from society to prevent them from causing harm. Strikingly, just days after her husband's funeral, Jacqueline destroyed all of his belongings and photographs, wanting nothing to remind her of him. However, Danielle managed to save a few pictures of her father, hiding them in her bedside table without her mother's knowledge. The £300,000 insurance payout, for which Paul was murdered, went to his children. The children lost both of their parents in an instant, but their difficulties continued. Their mother was fiercely opposed to allowing either her parents or the parents of her deceased husband to take care of them. She fought hard to deny them guardianship rights, which led to the children entering foster care, even though they had living grandparents. At the time of the tragedy, Danielle was just 11 years old, and her brother was only 5. Jacqueline managed to keep her parental rights and tried to manipulate her children from prison. She wanted them to publicly claim her innocence and used various pressure tactics to do so. For instance, she promised to approve their school trips if they visited her in prison, but she tricked them. During the visit, she insisted they testify for her and refused to sign the permission slip. As a result, they were the only ones in their class who couldn't go on weekend trips. Danielle is now living in Basingstoke, working at a daycare and in a relationship with Simon Bryce, an engineer, her brother, who has a solid education and has relocated to London. The harrowing tale of Jacqueline and Paul Crimble underscores the devastating consequences of a marriage sustained by obligation rather than love, trust, or respect. Jacqueline's calculated murder of her husband, driven by greed for a £300,000 British insurance payout, and executed with chilling ruthlessness alongside her lover, Roger Ferguson, not only claimed Paul's life, but also irreparably fractured their family. The children, Danielle, and her younger brother were left to grapple with the loss of their devoted father and the betrayal of a mother whose cruelty persisted even from behind bars. Despite inheriting the insurance money, no financial remedy could heal the emotional wounds inflicted by Jacqueline's actions or restore the stability stolen from their childhoods. This case serves as a stark cautionary tale. Clinging to a toxic relationship under the guise of duty or societal pressure can lead to catastrophic outcomes, leaving a trail of heartbreak and irreparable loss. Molly Nicole Watson was born on December 15, 1982, in Moberly, Missouri. Her parents, Timothy and Sandy, and her brother Tim, have always created a warm and supportive home. Diagnosed with Asperger syndrome, Molly embraced her differences and forged ahead with resilience and determination. Those who have come into contact with her often describe her as energetic, creative, and extremely passionate. Molly earned a master's degree in psychology and dedicated her career to education. She lived in a colorful and creative world filled with Harry Potter books, comic novels, Disney characters, and intricate cosplay costumes. Her creativity even extended to designing her own nail polish line. Her home was her sanctuary, packed with books, fantasy, and the comforting presence of her 5 cats. She was a unique mix of strength and gentleness, calm yet unapologetically herself. In her mid-20s, Molly married, but the relationship ended in divorce after 2 years. Not long after, she discovered she was pregnant before her son was born. Molly began a new and unexpected chapter, a relationship with Amber Brady, a childhood acquaintance. Though not close when they were younger, reconnecting years later brought them together. Both women were fresh from failed marriages, and what began as a surprise blossomed into a meaningful and fulfilling partnership. When Molly gave birth to her son, Declan, who was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, Amber was by her side. Together, they supported each other through life's challenges. After her maternity leave, Molly began working at the Moberly Area Correctional Center, where she met James Addy, a married Navy veteran and corrections officer 16 years her senior. Despite their differences, Molly and James grew close. James confided in Molly, claiming that his marriage to his wife Melanie was ending. Believing him, Molly allowed their friendship to develop into a secret affair. They discreetly met in motels, hiding their relationship, Molly from Amber and James from his wife. The truth unraveled when Amber spotted Molly with James at a gas station. Growing suspicious, Amber eventually followed Molly to a motel and confronted her. That confrontation marked the end of Molly and Amber's relationship. Now free from the constraints of her past, Molly is openly dating James and is madly in love with him. However, her friends noticed something unusual. Molly paid all the bills, while James was cold, distant, and unwilling to commit fully. Despite this, Molly believed he was the one. In October 2017, James told Molly that his divorce had been finalized, filled with happiness and hope. Molly took the initiative and proposed. After James agreed, she threw herself into planning the wedding with joy and excitement. She envisioned a Disney-inspired celebration based on Beauty and the Beast, with burgundy and gold as her chosen colors. Molly hired a wedding planner, makeup artist, hairstylist, and even purchased 2 wedding dresses because she couldn't decide between them. She documented her journey on a new YouTube channel, radiating happiness as she shared her plans. Her eyes sparkled in her videos as she spoke with enthusiasm and sang softly in her princess-like voice. To Molly, the wedding felt like a real-life fairy tale. As the big day approached, however, life took a darker turn. At the end of 2017, James's ex-wife Melanie was involved in a severe car accident that left her on life support. James had to step in to care for their children, and Molly stood by him during this difficult time. They considered postponing their wedding, but ultimately decided to proceed with their plans. In April 2018, just days before their wedding, Melanie unexpectedly passed away. Despite the heartbreak, Molly pressed on, handling the final wedding arrangements alone, while James focused on planning Melanie's funeral. The situation was deeply tragic, but Molly remained determined to prepare for what she thought would be the happiest day of her life. Amid the grief, a surprising detail came to light. Melanie wasn't James's first or even second wife. She was his fourth. Before meeting Molly, James had been married multiple times. When they went to the courthouse to apply for their marriage license, the process turned uncomfortable. James appeared anxious, avoided direct answers about his marital history, and seemed reluctant to share details. Molly either didn't notice or chose to ignore these red flags. Her love for James outweighed any doubts or concerns. However, Molly never made it to the altar. On the night of April 27, 2018, just 2 days before the wedding, her body was found on a remote gravel road in Monroe County. What initially seemed like an accident quickly developed into a homicide investigation. At the scene, investigators found no evidence of a struggle, and none of Molly's belongings were missing. Her jewelry remained untouched. Inside her car, police discovered wedding-related documents, including plans and checklists, everything bearing the name James. These clues led them directly to James's home. Around 2:30 a.m., officers knocked on James's door. However, instead of meeting a grieving fiancé, they encountered a woman, his wife, Melanie. This was shocking because Melanie was supposed to have died just days earlier in a hospital after a severe car accident. As it turned out, James had fabricated the entire story about Melanie's death. She was alive and still married to him, yet he had simultaneously planned to marry Molly. Both James and Melanie were taken in for questioning. Initially, detectives did not realize that Melanie was the woman James claimed was dead, only that they were dealing with James, who was allegedly involved in a murder while still married. Melanie, on the other hand, was blindsided. Melanie knew who Molly was, but thought she was just one of James's co-workers. When questioning turned to Molly's death, Melanie assumed the police were merely speaking to people who knew her. The truth came as a devastating shock. Melanie had no idea that her husband had been unfaithful, let alone engaged to another woman. James's double life had been so carefully hidden that Melanie, who lived in the same house as him, never suspected a thing. She told investigators that James came home every night like clockwork and showed no signs of dissatisfaction or a secret life. In hindsight, she began recalling suspicious details, such as how he often arrived home 2 hours late, which he brushed off as extra work or traffic. She had never pushed for explanations, and only now did the pieces begin to fall into place. Police uncovered that James had been living a double life for years. To Molly, James had claimed he was in the process of getting divorced, but in truth, he had never even filed for divorce. When questioned about his marital status, he invented a dramatic story about how his wife, Melanie, had been in a terrible car accident, was in a coma, and later died. Molly believed him. She trusted the man she loved and had no reason to doubt his word. Using this fictional story to hide his shady past, James accepts Molly's proposal and plans a wedding with her that he knows will never happen. When James's deception finally came to light, investigators began treating him as a suspect. Melanie provided a timeline for the night Molly was murdered. James had told her he was meeting a friend at 7:30 p.m., but he returned home closer to an hour later, claiming his friend had cancelled. However, Melanie and their teenage daughter contradicted his story. They recalled James arriving home closer to 10 p.m., far later than he had claimed. The timeline wasn't the only issue. Their daughter remembered that James went straight to the shower when he got home and then immediately started a load of laundry. For detectives, this behavior was telling. It suggested that James might have been trying to clean evidence like blood, dirt, or gun residue from his clothes. His alibi quickly unraveled. Police arrested James and scheduled formal questioning for the next day. Melanie, devastated by James's infidelity and deceit, returned home after giving her statement. Despite her heartbreak, she had to maintain a facade of normalcy for her daughter, who was excitedly preparing for a school dance. But behind closed doors, Melanie began searching for answers. Her investigation led her to the attic, where she uncovered shocking secrets hidden in a trunk: photos, letters, souvenirs, and evidence of a double life her husband had lived for 7 years. James had taken trips with another woman, Molly, claiming they were work-related or outings with friends. The betrayal was overwhelming. Melanie stayed composed for her daughter, but privately, she was unraveling a terrifying truth. This was not just a case of infidelity, but something far darker: murder. For nearly a decade, James had juggled 2 relationships, maintaining 2 homes and nearly entering into 2 marriages. But it all came to light when Molly, his mistress, was found dead. James's teenage daughter, Emma, didn't learn about her father's secret life from him or her mother. Instead, she discovered the shocking truth through an online news article her classmates had seen. Her world, once private, was now laid bare for everyone to see. For a teenager, the humiliation was unbearable. Whispers, stares, and judgment followed her through school hallways. As the story made national headlines, Emma uncovered even more heartbreaking details about her father's betrayal and Molly, the woman he had planned to marry. While reading news reports, Emma remembered she had met Molly before. Years earlier, her father had brought her to Molly's home to help sew a cosplay costume. At the time, Emma believed Molly was just a friend. Now, the memory seemed painfully clear as Emma and her mother, Melanie, struggled to come to terms with the betrayal. Law enforcement continued connecting the dots, building a case against James. At the scene of Molly's murder, investigators found tire tracks matching James's car. His vehicle had mud on it, consistent with the rural road where Molly had been killed. More damning evidence surfaced when they recovered a white t-shirt nearby, customized by Emma as a gift for her father. The t-shirt contained traces of gunpowder and Molly's DNA, making James the prime suspect. While the bullet that killed Molly was too damaged to be traced to a specific gun, the circumstantial evidence against James was strong. Phone records revealed that James had called Molly the night she died, speaking with her for 20 minutes near the site where her body was discovered. Additionally, Glenn McParron, the man who found Molly's body, testified that he had briefly encountered a white man around 50 years old near the scene that night. Prosecutors argued this man was James. Prosecutors argued that James's motive was fear. Molly had grown suspicious and had begun searching online for information about James's wife, Melanie. She found no obituaries or hospital records because Melanie was still alive. Once Molly discovered the truth, prosecutors believed James saw her as a threat to his secrets. Instead of ending the affair or confessing, he allegedly decided to silence Molly permanently. What made his crime so alarming wasn't just its brutality, but also its carelessness. James left a shirt designed by Emma at the crime scene and his name on documents in Molly's car. He behaved as if his actions couldn't be traced, but the evidence trail he left behind was glaring. The trial began on April 26, 2021, with prosecutors presenting tire tread analyses, forensic evidence, and witness testimonies to reveal the full scope of James's actions. Melanie testified, stating that she had no knowledge of her husband's affair and describing him as controlling, manipulative, and fully capable of murder. Emma's testimony added a chilling layer to an already disturbing case. She recalled her father, James, coming home late after 10 p.m. on the night of Molly's death. He went straight to the shower, and soon after, the washing machine started running. The strong smell of bleach filled the house. Emma remembered how nervous and on edge he seemed, behaving uncharacteristically. He lingered near her, silently, watching, then eventually walked away. Melanie revealed that during Molly's murder, she was still married to James, living under the same roof, and believing her life was normal. She had no idea her husband was leading a double life, using a separate phone to communicate with another woman. By the early hours of April 28, 2018, Melanie was grappling with an avalanche of devastating revelations. She discovered that her husband of more than 20 years had been planning to marry another woman. James had even fraudulently signed a marriage license, claiming to be divorced. The fantasy life he had woven with Molly was built on deception and ultimately ended in violence. Melanie had been unaware of his infidelity, that he had told others she was dead, and that her name was used to invent a fabricated tragedy. On the night of the murder, James had left their house in blue jeans, a black jacket, and boots. The next day, after the police left, Melanie began searching their home. Something felt off. She noticed his black jacket was missing, questioned him about it, but never got an answer. Her search led her to the garage, where James had parked a maroon car, unusually inside rather than outside, where he normally left it. Her suspicion deepened. During his trial, James Addy refused to testify in his defense, but submitted a written statement, a love letter to Molly, the same woman he stood accused of murdering. This act felt either disturbingly delusional or deeply arrogant. Later, he requested a new trial, claiming inadequate defense representation and alleging that some evidence in his favor had been withheld. However, the jury was unmoved. In July 2021, James Addy was convicted of first-degree murder and armed criminal action. He received a life sentence without parole, plus an additional 10 years. To the end, he declared his innocence and vowed to appeal. Reports surfaced of James confessing to a fellow inmate, bluntly stating that he ended up in prison because someone ended up face down in a ditch. By then, the damage was irreparable. In April 2018, instead of celebrating a wedding, Molly's family and friends gathered to bury her. What should have been the start of her new life became the date now etched on her headstone. But the tragedies didn't end there. In the ensuing months, her parents, Timothy and Sandy Watson, also passed away, unable to bear the devastation of losing their daughter. Sandy experienced severe psychological trauma after Molly's murder, and her mental health rapidly declined. Timothy, who devoted himself to caring for his wife during this time, succumbed to a heart attack in September 2020. The relentless stress, grief, and sorrow had taken its toll on him as well. Neither of them lived to see justice done or hear the guilty verdict in the courtroom. They were not there to witness the man responsible for their daughter's death being led away in handcuffs. Meanwhile, Molly's son, Declan, was left without a mother. After her death, ensuring his care became a priority. Thankfully, he was placed with relatives who are raising him in a loving and supportive home. A small glimmer of hope in an otherwise heartbreaking story. Tim, Molly's brother, now acts as the spokesperson for their family. In court, he addressed the jury with not only grief, but also a profound sense of urgency. He spoke of the devastating impact of Molly's murder, how the loss of his younger sister had not only been a terrible shock, but had also brought with it the loss of his parents. He shared how his mother had succumbed to mental illness, his father had passed away from grief, and how the absence of his 3 loved ones had left a painful void in his life where there had once been joy. Tim implored the jury to deliver justice, emphasizing that Molly had dreams, a career, and a son. She had been a bright, passionate individual full of life, but everything was taken from her in a single, selfish act. Tim told the jury that James had mercilessly chosen to take Molly's life and urged them to deliver a verdict that showed no mercy to him in return.